Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the Historic Districts Review Board. I am calling this meeting to order, and today we are September the 13th, 2022. Members of the board, turn on your mics. And Melissa, may we have a roll call, please?
Yes, Chair Rios.
Here.
Member Guida. I understand he's excused. Member Aguilar Medrano.
Here.
Member Berkeley.
Here.
Member Beachside.
Here.
Member Bienvenu.
Here.
Member Larson.
Here.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Are there any changes to the agenda, either staff or board members? No changes. Is there a motion to approve?
Larson moves to approve the agenda as submitted.
May I hear a second? Beachside seconded. Roll call vote, please.
Member Aguilar Medrano.
Yes.
Member Berkeley.
Yes.
Member Beachside.
Yes.
Member Bienvenu.
Yes.
Member Larson.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you. We have minutes of August 23rd, 2022. Any changes to these minutes? It appears there are no changes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Beachside so moves. Larson seconds.
Roll call vote, please.
Member Aguilar Medrano.
Yes.
Member Berkeley.
Yes.
Member Beachside.
Yes.
Member Bienvenu.
Yes.
Member Larson.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you. We have 5 findings of fact and conclusions of law. Any changes to any of these? It appears not. Motion, please.
Beachside moves to approve the findings of fact and conclusions of law as submitted. Larson seconds.
Roll call vote, please.
Member Aguilar Medrano.
Yes.
Member Berkeley.
Yes.
Member Beachside.
Yes.
Member Bienvenu.
Yes.
Member Larson.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you. Matters from the public. Anyone from the public wishing to come forward and speak on any issue? Do we have anyone on Zoom? Heather? No? Okay. Thank you very much. The first thing on the agenda is staff communications. The first case, that is, that we are going to be hearing.
Madam Chair, we've got one more staff communication to add to this, or to just report to the board. We do have a new staff member to introduce, and he's in the back. I'll have him stand up. His name is Ramon Sarason. So he's joining us half-time in HPD and part-time in current planning. So if you see him, give him a big welcome.
Ramon, welcome, and we're glad to have you on board. Thank you. He was on the field trip today, so that's very good. And today I also met the new board members. I had been out for 2 meetings, and welcome, Madeline, and welcome, Jennifer. Pardon?
I have a matter to bring to the board's attention, and that is that there was an appeal filed with respect to a matter that the H Board decided on May 24th, 2022. The appeal was with respect to the reconstruction of a stucco yard wall with a Latia extension in the Don Gaspar Area Historic District. That appeal was filed, and it was placed on the agenda for the governing body meeting tomorrow night. However, because we learned that the appellants had not sent out the notices that are required by Santa Fe City Code Section 14-3.1, subsection H4, that matter will not be heard before the governing body tomorrow night. We are determining whether or not there was good cause for the appellants to neglect the notice requirement, whereupon, if there was, it will be postponed to a later date.
Thank you, Attorney Rubalid. And talking about appeals, this evening, if you disagree with the decision that the board renders, you do have the option to appeal. And as Attorney Rubalid said, it'll go to the City Council, and you have to wait till the findings and conclusions have been approved, and you have up to 15 days to submit your appeal, and staff will gladly help you on that. Further staff communications?
Thank you, Chair Rios. This evening, we're going to present an informal presentation of the proposed changes at St. John's College, the Peterson Student Center. The applicant requested this preliminary review from the board because St. John's College, the Peterson Center, is considered a significant building per the Historic District's regulations, and as such, all facades are considered primary. And so in order for any addition to take place on St. John's College, on the Peterson Student Center, would require an exception. And we as staff, as well as the applicant, thought would be good and productive to have some dialogue with the board regarding their impressions on the proposed additions and give some feedback as well. The building was built in 1963 and 64 and was designed by Julian and Buckley, and for both the Peterson Center as well as with the master plan, the campus master plan. And it has not been changed very much over time. The most recent changes would relate to the plaza out front, and with the addition of the Lake Plato classroom building, the Levon classroom building. And the other change that has happened over time, but not recently, was the enclosure of the portal that was on the east elevation. So now there's two sets of doors that you walk through instead of just the one set of doors where that used to be a portal. And so with the changes in the grade and the connection to the Levon class building, then there was a change related to stairs and exiting the top level where the portal is. But I will I'll go ahead and turn this over to Sean Evans and his team and let them go through their presentation. And
Thank you very much, Heather. And yes, Member Aguilar Medrano.
Madam Chair, prior to the applicant beginning their presentation, I'd like to recuse myself from this case.
Okay, so let the record show that Member Aguilar Medrano is stepping out of the room. She has recused herself, and then when we go to the next case, we will call her back in. Okay, and I have a question for you, Heather. So this is, did I hear you say this is an informal hearing? Are we, the board is going to give a list of suggestions at the end of this presentation, or is this actually going to be submitted via a motion?
so there will be no action by the board tonight. So this is informal to just solicit your feedback on the proposal. And then at a later time, there's been no formal application filed yet. Then there will be a formal application that is filed for your review and approval.
Okay, so this is informal. So do these gentlemen need to be sworn in or not?
I'd like to defer to Melissa on that. It's not quasi-judicial under staff communications, but I will leave it up to the experts.
Or maybe to
Other-
Attorney Rubalid. Could you answer that?
I believe they should be sworn.
They should be sworn in? Okay.
Thank you.
Go ahead, gentlemen, and you can get sworn in.
Are you both going to speak? Okay, I'll swear you in. Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimonies you're about to give are the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you, and when you step to the podium, please state your name and address for the record.
Sorry. Thank you. It has really had almost
Might
nothing.
have to repeat everything you just said.
I can't
Just kidding.
remember.
Just kidding.
I would fail miserably. Anyway, it is the center of the campus. It is a student center, but it's terribly lacking in what it offers our students. So as a recruitment issue and a retention issue, renovating Peterson is extremely important to us. We haven't had the funds to do so in a very long time. We now do have the funds to do so, and we're very enthusiastic about doing it. The inside of the building, the Girard murals are hugely important. I can't speak architecturally, but I presume they are, but they're important to us as a community as well. They are deteriorating. There's a lot about the interior that is deteriorating, and one of the major parts of this is to restore those murals and other aspects of the building. But we're also hoping that you will consider the changes to the outside, which will allow us to expand much of what we can offer to our students in the way of student space. And that is it for me.
Thank you
Thank you
very
very
much.
much.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I appreciate your time tonight and really look forward to your honest feedback. I think you, oh, sorry, I'm Sean Evans, 1121 North Luna Circle, Santa Fe. I'm principal of AOS Architects here in Santa Fe. As Mr. Roosevelt said, the building is really quite intact, and we understand that that is valuable from a historic preservation perspective, but it does have some very severe, not only issues related to program and recruitment and retention that are critically important, but some severe building code, life safety, and accessibility issues that we're really trying to resolve. So you've seen the submittal, so I'm going to go quickly. We see here an aerial photograph of the campus with Peterson under construction on the left and the student center with the science building on the right. Mr. Roosevelt mentioned the interiors by Alexander Girard. There is this magnificent mural. If you haven't been there, I really encourage you to go. It's really one of the greatest works of contemporary art in Santa Fe. It's 140 feet long and is really outstanding. And there are actually many elements of Girard, Alexander Girard, who's an incredible legacy to Santa Fe within the building, light fixtures, these really interesting painted doors, and many other features. Site plan showing where it is on the campus. And here's existing kind of site plan. I just wanted to quickly note a few things for you. We are proposing and we are needing to make some changes to the landscape. When you drive into the campus, you're driving along this road. If you can see my hand moving right on the upper side of this image. And you kind of stare right into the loading dock. It's a rather unfortunate introduction to the campus. And then there is this drop-off area here where there's a handful of accessible parking spaces. However, that is not accessible. It doesn't meet ADA standards. We really do need to make that improvement. The stair coming up into the campus is really concealed behind landscaping, and the college receives many complaints that it's confusing. People don't know how to enter the campus. And we're trying to really welcome not only the prospective students, current students, but the people of Santa Fe to this campus, because they have many wonderful offerings. So we'll be talking a little bit about that. We are proposing a series of additions, which we'll get to. It was mentioned before that the landscape has changed quite a bit. If you look back at this original photograph, it's really very spare. It looks kind of like a dystopian science fiction movie. It has changed quite dramatically. There's a lot of vegetation. The concrete pavement has been replaced with brick. That'll happen before the National Register nomination. And a lot of accessibility improvements have been made. You all are familiar with that part of the city. It's very hilly. Accessibility is a really important thing that we need to do. We're adding a stair here. I'll talk about that in a minute. There's a garden here on the south side that wasn't built until the 1990s. It is not accessible. I don't know how that happened, because ADA was certainly in effect at that time. And then all of these walkways here are inaccessible. We will be making some accessibility improvements in the landscape to this part, to this door, which is a room called The Cave, which is kind of an undergraduate hangout space. And yeah, so here this says existing site plan. That was a mistake. I apologize. This is a proposed site plan. This is, again, very preliminary. I just wanted to point a few things out to you this evening. Here we see the reconfiguration of the roads. The red lines indicate where the current curb cuts are. We're going to be lowering a portion of this drive about 16 inches in order to achieve accessibility. And we're going to we'd like to reconfigure this staircase up into the campus so that it points to the entrance, so that people know where the entrance to the campus is. All right, keeps it dancing. We are proposing a bookstore addition here that I'll talk about in a little bit. This is the stair. Here is the reconfigured garden here that will provide accessibility and maintain the place, an outdoor classroom. We do need to make a series of small modifications to the landscape in the building. I'm not going to go into tonight because I know we're going to come back, but there's a series of funny life safety egress things that we need to resolve. So this is actually a new stair that we need to add. It really won't impact the aesthetics of the building, but we'll be telling you more about that later. A new series of handicap accessible ramps here, providing the access to that cave. And then, importantly, what we haven't yet explored, but we are looking into now, is that this number 10 here, where my hand is moving around, we are adding air conditioning to the building. It is currently not air conditioning, and the college is doing more and more summer programming. The building is really far too hot in the summer to do that. So we do need to add air conditioning. We do not want to put a ginormous chiller on the roof, but we have to put it somewhere. And so we've done a fair bit of analysis, and this is the best location that we can come up with. It will be screened with a stucco yard wall, as well as the trees surrounding it. So more on that to come. But tonight I really want to focus on the buildings. I'm going to skip through some of these plans. We can come back to them if there's need. This is the existing first floor plan. But I wanted to jump to this to talk about some of the interior features of the first floor. I've recognized that you have no jurisdiction of the interior. We're in a bit of a pinch here because we're really trying to conserve and preserve a highly significant interior by Alexander Girard. In the National Register nomination, it specifically says this building is significant because of its interior and because of the work of Alexander Girard. So we're trying to accommodate the necessary programmatic changes and preserve the Girard interior and resolve critical life safety issues, as I mentioned. So let me point out a few things. This blue line, where's my cursor? Here's the Girard mural. It's 140 feet long down the main corridor. And it's really we see bits of it here in this photograph down here. It's a magnificent work of art. And there are painted doors I referenced before. You see this red photograph here. This really playful, wonderful, many, many colors throughout the building. And we're working with Stephen Prinz, renowned local mural conservator, who will be working on the mural and the doors. Inside the building, between the bookstore and the coffee shop, we keep calling it the Wiggly Wall, but it's this kind of stepped wall that's indicated in pink here in this drawing. We see this photograph. I apologize how small the images are, but it's this kind of stepped wall with chalkboards, really important part of Girard's legacy in the building. When we were hired, the initial concept for the project was to merge the coffee shop and the bookstore. The coffee shop is this room here where it says Girard Masonry Wall. Bookstore is here. Because, as Mr. Roosevelt mentioned, in focus groups and talking with students who were applying to the campus, they really didn't feel that the Student Center offered them anything. And the culture of the campus is great books. It's the principle of the school. The bookstore is extraordinary. It's the best bookstore in town, as far as I'm concerned. Incredible offerings, numerous translations of any major text, not written in English that they're studying. A really amazing offering to the city. And initially the college was like, well, let's get rid of this wall between the bookstore and the coffee shop. And as we got into the understanding the history of the building, we realized that was one of Girard's really key legacy elements. And I basically said no, and I put my foot down. Sorry, Mark. And we said, well, we'll figure out another way to do this. And so that's part of why we've kind of ended up towards this addition. I'll talk more about it. We're also looking at the incredible views out of the building. and from various places, and trying to balance preservation of the building with life. Life safety has to trump everything that we do, and then the programmatic needs. The first floor proposed, this is preliminary. As we mentioned, we're looking at 3 additions that are shown in with these red outlines. I'll talk about the bookstore addition first. As I mentioned, we're really aiming to, I think it's really important to hang on to this really curious wiggly wall. Can I just close all this stuff out? And so what we've come up with as a solution is to create a 775 square foot plus or minus addition here that represents about a 40% growth of the bookstore, which will make it economically resilient. Right now they're really struggling to break even in the bookstore. They really need that extra space. And by doing that, we're able to then create an opening between the coffee shop and the bookstore here, and we're going to penetrate this wall here. And we're working on the designs of that, but that is really allowing us to preserve this key aspect of the Girard interior. The second addition is what we're calling the East Entry addition. This will make much more sense when I show you the second floor plan, so I'm going to postpone that discussion. The third addition we're calling the South Court addition, and serves a number of purposes. Interestingly enough, the Student Center has no lounge space. There's no comfortable space for students to relax and talk with each other about their days and everything that's going on. There are lounges in the campus. They're all in the dormitories. And so the undergraduates only have lounges in their dorms. And so if there are students in different dorms, they really can't come together because of security. It's complicated. And most importantly, students who are off-campus residents have no lounge space. So we really need to get this into the Student Center. There's nowhere to accommodate it in the interior. Additionally, this lounge addition will provide space for gender-neutral restrooms. The building is dramatically underplumbed in terms of plumbing code requirements, which were much different in the 1960s. Most importantly, from a conservation perspective, this addition allows us to really remove very damaging natural light that's flooding through this existing glass wall here that is damaging the mural. So we're trying to insulate the mural from the UV spectrum and just the photons of natural light. Existing second floor, and as I mentioned before, one of the things that is really important is this new stair. We're looking down on the roofs of the bookstore and Southport Edition. I won't talk about them in this slide. Here, good Lord. It's got a mind of its own. The major assembly spaces in the building are on the second floor. And so we've got a lot of occupants. As Heather mentioned in her introduction, there was a major change about 15 years ago when Levin Hall was constructed, and there was a stair up to this terrace, and this will make more sense when we look at the three-dimensional descriptions. There was a stair that was removed from the building at that point, and so the building now does not have anywhere near sufficient egress capacity in terms of stair width. We've got a lot of people on the second floor. We need to get them out safely. We are sprinklering the building as part of our upgrade, but that doesn't buy us enough extra lenience in terms of the additions. The other thing to take note in terms of this stair is that there are a series on the north side, a series of very large terraces, which provide space from these large meeting rooms in the Great Hall. Those terraces also do not have appropriate egress, so we're connecting them all and linking them through to this slight expansion of the east terrace, and then that will access this stair. And again, that will make more sense in 3 dimensions. Trying to go quick. We've included the existing and proposed elevations for each facade, and we are not changing the proportion of stucco to glass on the building. We are simply moving glass out away from the building to preserve views and provide these programmatic expansions. So when you look at the existing versus proposed, they don't look all that different, and we think that's a good thing. And that helps us meet the Santa Fe Design Code as well. So I'm going to skip right through these. I think these serve better with the 3D views. Here we have a couple of views from 1964 and 1970, and you can see this dramatic grade change that has happened at the building. You can see here in this image on the right, in particular, when we look at the contemporary photographs in a second, you'll see that There was the area of the campus was actually about a story up from where it is now, and that was lowered when they built Levin Hall. And here we see some more recent photographs, early 2000s, where this portion of the building really wasn't experienced from the main plaza. We can see here this earthwork happening and the connection that was removed that has caused this life safety problem. So here we have our early computer model on the top, and you can see now this landscape is all at one level, whereas before it was tiered. And this is we have a lot of people that need to egress off of this deck that we need to get safely out of the building. One of the first things that we did, we also have an accessibility challenge that I forgot to go through in the plans. Given that the building was built in 1964, obviously ADA was enacted in 1991, there is a plywood ramp that's really hastily constructed here. There's about a 2-foot difference between this portion of the building and this portion of the building. That ramp is too steep. It doesn't meet ADA. It looks terrible. It's an intrusion into this remarkable historic interior. So what we're proposing to do is actually take that ramp and move it outside onto the terrace. So there's a ramp in here, and there's a small lounge addition here as well, built onto the existing deck. That'll make more sense in the three-dimensional. Okay. So at a minimum, what we need to do is add a stair from grade up onto this masonry cube, this stone construction, and we need a ramp addition. In my mind, these are both kind of carbuncles. We've got a really extraordinary historic building. We're trying to add on to the building, solve life safety problems while not taking away from the building. And in my mind, these absolutely do. So this is the stair this is what we're currently proposing in terms of the stair, where the stair is actually concealed behind this masonry wall. And there's a lot that we can do, and we're willing to explore with you all the language of the stair and the walls to reduce its mass if that's an issue. And we're creating a small raised terrace that has a ramp going up to it with some raised seating to create a place and make this really part of the campus and allow this to be a benefit to the campus. Our initial design for the additions we're seeing now in the bottom screen. Our gut is really more in line with the Secretary of the Interior standards, where additions should be compatible yet differentiated. And so we were thinking of this a little more contemporary in this initial design. This second design that we've been looking at more recently takes the language of the ports halls, which are so common throughout Santa Fe, but also the campus, and try to create something that's more in keeping with that, that's not drawing as much attention to itself. We did have a cursory courtesy review with the State Historic Preservation Office last week, and they've given us some really wonderful feedback. Their concern is about kind of the monumentality of this, and they would really like us to diffuse the prominence of the second floor ports hall, which is set back. One of the things that we have to do is think about energy code now, of course. So we will be making these columns out of steel, whereas the existing columns are concrete. We'll wrap them in something either stucco or metal, so we will have opportunity to differentiate them and make them a little more diffuse. So I think we're going to end up, what I'd like to explore next is a language where the first and second floors are a little bit different, so it feels more like the existing building and other buildings on the campus. Here's the existing view of where the bookstore addition is happening, and we have these kind of wispy trees that we're looking through because the campus is highly vegetated. So these additions, we're looking at computer drawings, but they will be largely screened by vegetation. So we see here some existing views. There's curious ramps with steps, and we're trying to improve accessibility. Our initial design below was a quite contemporary kind of glassy structure with exposed 4 columns on the north, but trying to make it differentiated. More recently, we're looking, as we mentioned, with the stair entrance, looking at a language of columns and very thin projecting cornice elements that carry themes from the existing building. We think this is highly appropriate. The last addition is the South Court addition. Here we have this very broad south-facing glass wall with no protection from the sun. And we do, at times of the year, particularly in the winter, we get a lot of direct light right through those glass onto the mural. And this is our initial proposal, which was, again, more contemporary with the steel canopy casting a shadow. And we're looking at something more like this now, which kind of continues this language of the column, the glass behind, which is more in keeping with the language of the design, the Santa Fe Design Code, that large glass elements are allowed only if the So that is what we're hoping to do, and I hope I've explained kind of the necessity of this. I'm happy to receive your feedback and hear your thoughts.
What I think that we need to do is take one elevation at a time,
Okay.
so that the board can thoroughly look at it and digest what is happening in each elevation, and then we will give our comments. The elevations that you are making changes to are the north, south, and the east. So we will start with whichever one you would like. And,
Let's start with the east.
okay, and
The stair.
what is the total square footage that you are adding? The building right now consists of 45,000 plus square feet, and you are proposing.
The bookstore is about 775 square feet. This east entrance is about 422 square feet, and these are enclosed heated areas. And this is all in the memo that's in your packet. The South Court addition is 990 square feet.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Heather.
Thank you, Chair Rios. And I would just like to point out that the Historic Districts Review Board actually visited the site today as part of their typical field trip. So we got the opportunity to walk around not only the exterior, but also the interior.
Wonderful. Thank you for letting me know that.
So, board members? Yes, Member Larson.
Yeah, so I am really appreciative of your presentation. Thank you so much. I'm really happy that we have robust documentation for this property, and it helps us to make our decisions as well. And clearly, you've put a lot of thought into this building, which we may not have seen, 10, 15, 20 years ago. This might have just been dismissed as, insignificant architecturally. So it's really nice to see it being honored by the proposed additions, and also really enlightening to see the consideration that the exterior is putting to the interior. Which, of course, is contributing for its association with Alexander Girard and his design. And I just really appreciate that, we're thinking holistically about the property. So I think we should all consider that in our feedback as well, with the need to protect the interior and enhance it. Personally, and in my mind, for each elevation, I am in the school of following, the strong differentiation that's still subtle, using more of a contemporary language. But I also understand that we have, a little bit different of a way of doing things in Santa Fe. But that's not to say that we can't, consider the least impactful choice, even if it is not totally in the school of the Spanish Pueblo Revival or Spanish Territorial Revival styles. So with that being said, I really like either the revised proposed or the initial proposed ideas for each elevation, but specifically looking at the east. I think that's the most subtle of the previous proposed. I think it provides a nice clarity to the original elevation, and is less, dominant, but at the same time, I think you've defended your decision and using, a more structured interpretation of the portal or of the, column and cornice, and that's also very much, in the interest of the college and its, connection to those classical sort of elements as well. So I think that's really interesting. So either way, I think they're both very, very nice and appealing.
Thank you, Member Larson. Member Berkeley.
I would also second what you said in terms of appreciating how much thought you've put into this in your presentation, and I know the interiors aren't at all part of our preview, but we did go inside since you mentioned it quite a lot in your report. And it's absolutely magnificent. And I just want to say I've never been there myself, and anyone who has never been there, I say go. I mean, it's just a really work of art. It's beautiful and very much worth saving, and thank you for considering that. The question I had generally in an even bigger picture with your campus, because when on the field trip you can see your very newest building is right next door to this building. And so the question that came to my mind was, do you have an overall new master plan, campus plan, since the very first one, or are you kind of doing one-off projects as you go along as needed?
My firm has been hired solely to work on the Peterson Student Center. I know that there are a variety of things being discussed about improvements. I'm not aware of any large new facilities being planned. There's not really anywhere to put them.
Yeah, I was just curious because I've been in a similar situation in my other life of college campuses, trying to modernize and meet student needs while also trying to maintain the architectural integrity of the grounds. And I just wondered if you had an overall plan that you might be working within, but it sounds like you're not. Okay.
Thank you. Member Benvenu?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, yeah, this is an extremely interesting project. You put a lot of thought into it, and I think we're a little stymied perhaps tonight because this seems to be a project that's in flux right now, and you're looking for some feedback, but we're not really necessarily deciding on these proposals, correct? Because you may completely change these based on feedback you receive.
Correct. I think, from our perspective, we're really most interested in, does this board see a possibility of giving us an exemption for these additions? From my mind, this one that we're looking at, the east entry, the stair, we simply must do this. We don't need to, it doesn't need to be designed this way. I personally think that this is a very appropriate response. But we do have some very real constraints that I think are certainly grounds for the exemption. I think most of all on this facade, I hope I've made the case for all of them. So that, I mean, my goal tonight is really like, does anyone have a huge problem with additions on the building? And let's talk about it. And then if aesthetic concerns, we're moving quick. We want to get this designed quickly so we can get it into construction. But that's really, we are interested in aesthetic feedback.
Okay, I appreciate that. I would say I do personally have some issues with the designs.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not aesthetic, per se. I mean, I think you've done a nice job. I think it's an attractive building under all of your proposals. The problem I have is that it no longer looks like the building that's there right now. It looks very similar, but you've basically taken a very intact, what has been designated as a significant building by this board.
Please speak into your mic.
And has been recognized as part of a national historic property on the historic registry, and I think changed it enough in multiple elevations that it no longer retains that historic integrity. I'm not saying that it's not as attractive. It might be. It's just that, to me, none of the elevations any longer that are being altered really read the same, because the massing and the negative spaces are so important to the original building, and essentially what you've done is just fill in the negative spaces to get more room.
I would contest that a little bit. I think one of the things that, as we've looked at the building, that is so interesting is This was designed by Holland and Buckley, which is John Galmeem's descendant firm. And it's really, one of the things that I love most about the building is the playfulness of the massing. And it's really, these guys were really skilled at studying the historic pueblos from which our architectural language is based upon, understanding the ways in which those pueblos were never static. They were always changing, and buildings were always being added to, and wings coming down, and rooms going up and coming down. And if you look at the cornice heights and the massing, it's based on that Pueblo methodology of construction, where it's really about the room. And so if you look at each of these facades, the cornices don't line up. They're always kind of hopping up and down a little bit. And it almost reads like a building that has grown over time, even though it wasn't. And I think, we've worked on many John Galmeem buildings, and he certainly understood that these buildings were living. He made changes in many buildings around the state. These buildings we have to allow our buildings to grow and change while balancing their architectural integrity. And that's really what we're after in this project.
Yeah, to some extent that's true, of course. But we as a board are also hamstrung by the fact that we have an ordinance that provides that once the structure is considered significant, you're not supposed to make the kinds of evolutionary changes you're talking about without very strong reasons that have to be proven to a very high evidence.
And I certainly respect that. I think that we've got some severe life safety challenges.
Right. So
accessibility challenges.
That part, I certainly understand the need to make those changes. Okay. That is unquestionable.
Thank you.
You have to make code changes to make it safe. So I would differentiate those types of changes from needing some more square footage in the bookstore, for example.
Yeah, they are all intertwined, and I don't have enough time to get into the.
Mm-hmm. So, I would certainly understand the need, for example, to have that egress developed. But I'm not necessarily clear on the need for the portals and the additional space on the east-facing facade, other than the fact that it might make the space more useful inside, which I understand. But again, we as a board are tasked with the responsibility of protecting the historic integrity of the building once it's been designated as significant. And I really do feel that infilling all of these spaces will change the integrity sufficiently that it will no longer qualify as significant.
I would like to say that as I mentioned, we did meet with the State Historic Preservation Office. They were very enthusiastic about the project, very excited about what we were doing, very complimentary about this. They had no concerns about damaging the historic integrity of the building, and that's their job, to make sure that that is maintained.
Mm-hmm. Right. Their standards are, of course, different than ours, but I understand that that's useful information. So, anyway, we're just looking at the east facade right now. I would have some issues with the bookstore expansion and also the southern-facing facade, which is basically more or less an infill of, again, an important negative space in that original design. So if there were ways to achieve what you want to achieve, and I understand that normally we would say, can't you find that space in the interior? That would be appropriate to the standards. Right. In this particular case, you are 100% correct to protect the interiors, so that does seem to be taken off the table.
Yeah, and that
does argue in favor of the exterior alterations. Yeah. Although, if you had originally thought a solution to the bookstore was to expand into the lounge, you could probably still do that and retain those tile walls, correct? They would just become part of the bookstore.
Well, that's the trick, is that, to expand the bookstore and merge the bookstore and the coffee shop the way that the initial desire was, would absolutely require us to eliminate a major work of Gerard.
Mm-hmm. And then the difference between the two proposals is an interesting one, because I think that the more recent proposals you have there have the unfortunate effect of looking too much like the existing building, so that it becomes very difficult. I think to an untrained eye, it would look like that's the original building, and you'd be very hard pressed to make the differentiation unless it was pointed out to you, whereas your original proposal made a much stronger differentiation.
I think we would work through that in the detailing and the materiality of the design in a way that would be acceptable.
Okay, because of course, if you are going to be permitted to make this type of addition, it would be important to find that balance between
Absolutely.
being in conformity with our ordinance, which is required, and secondly, in harmony with what's existing, and yet
Right.
differentiated.
And my reading of the ordinance is that it's not that you can't add on to primary facades, it's just that you
Need an exception.
An exception.
Yeah, that's correct.
And if you don't have an exception in the process, it's an unconstitutional taking.
Mhm.
If Jennifer has something to say, she should go.
Sorry, yeah, I can make it just a few general comments, and I just like to say I appreciate the thoughtful presentation that you've offered and the reasoning behind what you're trying to accomplish. I think it's interesting that this building originated as part of a contemporary design for its time in response to a need for a modern educational institution. And I think what you're trying to do now is accomplish very much the same thing, meet the needs of something that's more modern for our time with a building that's now historic. We do have an obligation under our code, a particular obligation to significant buildings. So it makes it difficult for us to wholesale endorse changing this many facades of a significant building. I believe this is one of the original buildings on the campus.
That's correct.
It's the largest, I believe, or one of the largest. Every facade is slightly different, which makes it a significant structure. And here we're seeing a proposal to change 3 of those facades. So in that way, it seems like a lot. And there's not many buildings in Santa Fe of this style. It's very unique. And with respect to its interpretation of the territorial revival style in a mid-century expression, the large storefront openings and the repetitive glazing, especially at the top of the doors, is something that we consider to be unique, and I don't think repeated elsewhere in Santa Fe. So preserving those elements, I find to be of particular interest. I also think that the land that was donated for this campus spans both sides of an arroyo, so it was always sloping, and the original landscaping took into account that sloping by terracing. So the landscaping seems to be integral to the feel of the campus. And I'm a little concerned about although it's not our purview, the flattening out of spaces and eliminating that sort of unique setting of the building. I wonder if there was a consideration at all of a separate building to address the needs of a larger bookstore or a coffee shop or the things that are desired for the recruitment and retention of students. There's a lot of space still available that's used as parking and other functions.
There really isn't any more space in the historic core of the campus. The student center is in the appropriate location in the center of campus, and where there are dorms to the east and to the west. We certainly, we actually went in every building on campus, to confirm that some of the upstairs meeting rooms in the building couldn't be repurposed as lounge space, and we found that those were unique size spaces on campus. There's a room called the Junior Commons, which is the largest meeting room on campus, and it's the only room on campus that is large enough for an entire faculty meeting. So we really can't take that away and turn that into a lounge space, and similar explorations for all the other spaces on campus. So we did investigate that.
And what about just separate new buildings?
There's really no space split them, unless it were at the very far-flung edge of the campus and the bookstore, coffee shop. They need to be in the student center.
That's all I have for now. Thanks.
Member Larson, did you have something further?
Yeah, just a couple more comments. I think that, the way that we, are thinking about this is just the way the board, always tries to think about things from both sides. And this point, we're at a really interesting precipice at the campus, right, where we're facing probably enrollment challenges and clearly accessibility and safety challenges. So this is the point where, the historic preservationist has to think about, the actual principle of this case. The fact is this building is significant to our history. It's been determined as such, and at this point, we're at a severe loss or we're at a severe risk for losing that building if we do not allow it to meet modern needs for, equitable reasons of accessibility and, for the reasons of the college being allowed to move into the 21st century in its design and in its function. So with that being said, we have to think about this as more than just the physical setting and physical appearance. When we look at places, we're thinking more holistically and beyond just the material aspects. And I think as a board, we should, try to move into that thinking of considering all 7 of the aspects of historical integrity beyond just the material value and beyond just the design, but also thinking about how this building functions and how it should be allowed to function. Also, with consideration and respect to the interior of the building. When you present this case, ultimately, I think it's very important that you assert the actual historical significance and how it was determined, what the methodology was behind that, because under, criteria C, we're looking at design, and to me, was this actually, my question is, was this actually determined as under C from the exterior, or was it determined from the interior? And where is the argument in that way?
The register nomination is pretty clear. It's C for the interior.
So, as a board, I think it's really relevant to consider the interior, because it only exists because of the significant design. It's only existing as a significant property based on its design of the interior, and then of course the greater design of the college and campus. And lastly, just the final point I want to make: this building or this project is presenting something that other projects couldn't even dream of, with the proposal to restore a mural that is extremely intricate and I'm assuming very delicate on the interiors, that is facing UV damage and probably environmental damage from moisture and several other concerns. This restoration effort that we have not seen applied to other artistic properties in Santa Fe, like the multicultural mural that we've lost due to neglect. So if we continue to neglect this and not support, this holistic thinking behind our historic properties and properties that the community cares about, we will, be at risk for losing them. So I think, that's just my soapbox.
Thank you very much for your comments, Member Larson. Everyone's comments are very valuable, and they're different, as have been stated this evening. Do you have anything further at this point? Yes, Member Berkeley.
I just wanted to go back to my original question, and actually probably that's why I asked that question, is if you had a new overall campus master plan. You did a lot of explaining about why you were making these changes, in large part based on the interior of your building, but you didn't really speak much to the availability or lack of availability anywhere else on your campus for a new building, or any consideration of just repurposing buildings throughout the campus. So this, I was just thinking that it might perhaps help your case if you were able to add a little bit more into that, in addition to your talking about the interior of the building.
We will certainly do that. Thank you. It's very helpful.
Thank you.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I just want to interject a point of clarification. So, Member Larson had spoke about, the National Register nomination, and it's the integrity, that piece, why it's significant. That is separate from our local code. So when I just wanted to make it clear that when our board designates significant, it is a separate process. It can be separate. It's a completely separate case and for separate reasons. So that is something that I believe, yes, should be factored in, because we don't want to undercut our partners in the preservation community, but we have to look at it in a very different light. So that it's not significant to us for that reason, but we still need to factor it in a way. But the reason, I think we have the old case information, it becoming significant as part of your packet. So I just want to refer you back to that.
Thank you, Carly. Yes, that is true, because we have to uphold our ordinance. That's what we have to rely on, our ordinance. And that is not to say that we do not respect the national ordinances, but we have to go by what our ordinance indicates and dictates to us.
Yeah, and I should have, finished that thought, but I think sometimes, the National Register significance determination might also parallel the locals, so it might be interesting to see, what findings were made at the local level that may be in line with what was determined at the national level.
And if I may just interject one last thing, I think you're absolutely right from a regulatory perspective, but I would just ask that be considered in terms of the exception. We do have, I believe we have a good hardship case in terms of building code, accessibility, and preservation of the interiors, which are called out by the United States government as highly significant.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. At this time, I would like to hear from the public. I think that's very important that we get comments from the public. Anybody from the public wishing to comment in reference to this particular project? If so, come forward. Don't be bashful.
You swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Elizabeth West, and I live at 318 Center Street in Santa Fe. And I'm really quite surprised at how pleasing this addition to a really favorite building of mine. I have grown up with St. John's because I arrived here in 1966. And so I'm very, very familiar with that building because I went to so many talks and I've bought books there and all that good stuff. So I really appreciated what Ms. Larson said about the holistic approach. Actually, you all have addressed that, and the fact that you have taken into consideration, because of the way it was presented, that the indoor and outdoor sort of organic reaction to the different parts, the indoors, the outdoors, reacting to each other is very pleasing. I liked what you mentioned about it having a playful approach, very much the way Meme was himself. So it really does honor that. Now, these are mostly reactions I have to the design, the most recent updating of the designs I much prefer. The very modern eyebrow in one elevation is not as attractive to me because it jars and it sticks out too much. I like the idea so much of trying to preserve the mural, and I've been there so many times where there's blazing sun and strange ways of adapting. Also, the business of moving, say, the bookstore or a coffee shop to a different place, I don't think is appropriate for the kind of structure of the whole campus. But that's probably another comment that could be made in more depth. This place was given to St. John's knowing what St. John's University tries to do and the college tries to do. And so spreading coffee shops around, this is not Harvard Square. This is a very welcoming place, but it's cellular but very connected. So to spread it around doesn't seem like a good solution. One thing that I don't quite understand is the change in the landscape. But I like it all being kind of peculiar and lumpy, so we probably can figure all that out. Anyway, I am surprised that something where we could talk about infill is so appealing. And the variety of heights, the variety of setbacks, the amount of glass, yes, that's happening there, but seems to follow Meem's original idea. And the family, in fact, the family's intent for this part of town. So I feel more positive than I was expecting to be because of your newest iterations. That's the right word. So thank you.
Thank you,
It
Elizabeth.
doesn't often happen that I can feel so positive.
Well, good. Anyone else wishing to come and comment? Step forward.
Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
You,
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the
Vendor
record.
Contractor, 924 Shoefly Street. As alumni, class of 79, and colleague architect in town, I want to commend you guys on a great job. The Vendor Contractor. I want to commend you on doing a wonderful job for a building that I love, that represents a heart of Santa Fe for me. And well done. And I think this is really in keeping with what adaptive reuse, giving new life to old buildings is all about. And I just wanted to state my support for this scheme.
Thank you very much for your comments. Anyone else? Board members, do you have anything further? I have a question for Heather. Heather, this is, of course, a significant building, meaning that all elevations are primary. And with what has been presented to us this evening, is it your opinion that this building would still remain significant?
Chair Rios, members of the board, I certainly did not review in detail the second phase of design drawings. We were at the site visit and we were looking at that first set. My only concern with the second set is making sure that it's distinguishable enough, as Board Member Larson said, so that we're not replicating exactly what's there. With reference to the historic status of the building, I would have to study it a little bit more, but I think they're on the right track. Let me just say that.
I know that you have been working closely with the applicants, and so I was going to ask Mr. Evans, did the board provide enough information for you to move forward on your project?
Well, I think I certainly got the we've got a great spectrum of guidance, and this is, you know, I thought it was a great advice. It was great to hear the diversity of thought and opinion. We will take this all into account as we figure out how to move forward.
Well, thank you, because this is a difficult project. You can well imagine that we are sitting here on this board, see that this building is significant, which means all sides are primary, and then you are making changes to 3 of those 4 sides. And I think that we have to weigh this very diligently, and I think by the comments that were made this evening, you know that this board is very much involved in every project that comes before us.
Yes.
So hopefully we have provided some good information to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. Good luck. And we will move on to old business. We have one case under old business, and that's located at 532 Don Gaspar. And that is Carly's case. Let the record show that Member Aguilar Medrano is back.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. We have seen this property before. We are looking at 532 Don Gaspar Avenue. That's case 2022-005448. For the new board members, I think this is the first time they'll be seeing this tonight. In the past, we have seen this come forward for a status review earlier this year, and then recently, about a month ago, we saw it come forward, and the board asked for changes and more detail. So tonight, I'll do a quick review of the plans and the building itself. So just a little bit of the background. We are looking at the twin, as we like to call it, 532 Don Gaspar. And this, so we are in the Don Gaspar Area Historic District, the Craftsman Bungalow that's been listed. It was listed originally as contributing to the downtown and east side. The board reviewed it to do a status review and designate it as significant earlier this year. It was built in 1928, Tyler's Drugstore, so it was used not as a residence but a commercial building. The building has maintained its footprint mostly throughout its time, except for the back porch has changed in size, but is in historical change. So you can see here we have the we have it as a smaller. If you can see that little porch in the back there. Okay, and there's this 1982 photo and 1995 photo, so you can see that ramp was added, and that'll be removed as part of this application. I'm going to direct your attention to the site plans where there is a yard wall, the addition of this yard wall. That wasn't very clearly shown in the last hearing that we saw this come forward, but you'll see it starts in the northeast corner and wraps around to where the parking stalls end there. So, part of this proposal is a yard wall. The twin does not have one, and this is a stucco yard wall with brick detailing, brick pilasters, and a wrought iron gate. It's about, it is 4 feet tall. Okay, let's get through these. North facade, we are also seeing the change of Windows, all the non-historic windows will be replaced. There was a window assessment, and the exception was removed from this case because they will be, the proposal is to replace all of the damaged windows that are considered beyond repair. So once we are looking at beyond repair, they are not looking at replacing any that are within repair, so there's no exception applied for that. Okay, so you can see in the dashed lines, we see which windows are going to be replaced, that ADA access ramp will be removed, and there will be a lift added in the back. So from the last time we saw this case, there have been some slight updates and changes based on the details that we were really looking for, or rather the board was looking for. So this is the back porch detail, and this did require an exception. We believe staff recommends that all the exception criteria were met, but you may require some further testimony rather. So one of the board's comments last time was to space these vertical posts, these columns out a little further because they were very tight and did not fit the building's proportionality very well. Another comment was to add some more, come back and add the details so it can be further examined what this back porch is really going to be looking like. That has been added. There's been an increase of about 6 inches of this little of the overhang of the porch and post, and pulling it back a little bit more in with the house. Now all of the railings are wood and to be painted. And then we also have details for the replacement of the roof. And the roof has been found to be pretty heavily damaged, roof decking rotted. You'll see that in your packet. Here's a blow-up of the details that we're looking at tonight. I still have an added condition on this one, just that the wrought iron remain the color of wrought iron, not to be painted to be the match of the stucco. That said, the board also looked at and I left the old panel in the packet so you could see the difference. There's a panel of the shingles that were all on one panel, and that matches the twin, the replacement roof on the twin, but it's highly reflective. The board's comments were that it was very reflective and it was very flat and panelized. To try to match closer the detail of the individual shingles that were there, the comments were to go with a more flattened panel, but an individual shingle, and one that might not have that bright reflectivity. Despite that making it look slightly different from the twin, hopefully later on, whenever those panels get replaced, we will have them match a better in-kind panel. And we have these documents on file, so we'll be able to review those. That said, let me make sure I'm just not missing anything. Otherwise, it does comply with the general design standards for all H districts and the Don Gaspar Area Historic District. I can stand for questions, or we can go ahead and turn it over to the applicant now.
Thank you, Carly. Any clarification questions for Carly at this time? Member Beachley.
Thank you. Could you please remind us that the exception is requested for the replacement of the porch, but not for the roof?
Not for the roof. So whenever we are replacing materials, the way the code reads is that replacement of historic materials that are repairable. If they are repairable, and that's why we require the assessments from someone who can go look at the windows and give a really good assessment of detail, of the detail rot that we're going to see. Same thing with the roof. So that's, now, if it weren't, and this is the reason they're coming back, if it is, we're going as tightly in kind as we possibly can. Now, if it's not in kind, that's when an exception is requested.
Is this considered in kind, in your opinion?
I think this is I think this is as close as we can find from any manufacturer at this point. So if there's none on the market that we can really, this meets that definition.
Thank you.
Any other questions at this time? If not, will the applicant or applicants come forward and get sworn in?
You swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Kevin Georges, 214 Truman Street, Northeast Albuquerque, New Mexico. Thank you for seeing us again. I believe that we've made the changes that the board requested. As you can see, the detail on the walls a lot nicer than it was last time we were here. It was just a plain stucco wall. In the report, I do want to make a couple of clarifications. On page 2, where it says the applicant proposes the following exterior alterations, there was item number 2. It says replace the historical windows with double hung wood casement windows. Well, casement and double hung are the different windows, so it needs to say double hung and eliminate casement. And also, we are replacing some fixed windows in the east elevation. Upstairs on the second floor, there was 3 windows that are fixed. They're not operable. So I'd like to propose that change be made. And then, as Carly said, that we're going to paint the wrought iron black. In item number 4, it says to match the El Rey stucco. And so I just want to make sure that's not an issue after it gets approved. We're very happy with the changes, and we hope that you approve it. Is there any questions for me?
Let's see, you are replacing 7 windows?
Yes.
How many windows does the house have?
22.
Ooh, okay. So, and then you're repairing the rest of them?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Questions, board members? Member Larson.
I just want to thank you for the, thorough research that you put into the property. It helps to have, a lot of context, and I think you have put a lot of thought into the, replacements and minimizing those as much as you can. Also, appreciative of finding an alternative to the roof material. I think it's, it's great if we can get something that looks exactly like what's already there, but in the case of a roof, I think this achieves that. It still has the same effect, and I think I wasn't here at the last meeting, but I can see that you've taken those comments into account, and I'm very appreciative of that.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Member Larson. Any other questions or comments?
I would also like to mention that in the Windows survey that we had completed, they recommended that we remove the aluminum screens, and we're going to be doing that.
Thank you. Member Berkeley.
Yeah, I also wanted to say I wasn't here for your first presentation, but in reading this, I really appreciated the care and effort you seem to be putting into the restoration of this. Again, really not a very special building. And I was just curious, this question, so you have this very historic metal roof, and I know you have to replace it, but what are you going to do with all that roofing material? Or is someone going to have a chance to repurpose it in some other way or reuse it in some other way?
If you've been to the site, there's not very much left.
Oh, really? Okay.
Most of it's rusted.
Okay.
The finish is worn off of it, and pretty much all of it's rusted. And we would certainly recycle it.
Okay. Thank you.
Member Van Venue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for taking all of our comments to heart and coming back with a proposal that addressed all of them, which I think is very satisfactory. The only thing I wasn't clear on is, did you designate a color for the roofing tiles?
Well, they're just aluminum. They're finished tin.
They come in various colors, I believe.
Well, this particular one doesn't. It's just natural finish.
Okay.
Madam Chair, Member Bienvenu, I believe there is, in the spec on this one, on one of the options, there is the opportunity to get a different finish, a galvanized finish plus paint them. But that's only for a painted option, and I believe doing painted.
So what exactly is the color, would you say? How would you describe it?
Like stainless steel?
And is it in any way aged in appearance, or?
No, there was some suggestions about removing the finish. And if you do that, you're weakening the material, and it's going to be rusting in 3 or 4 years. You're going to be replacing it again.
Madam Chair, Member Bienvenu, so if you go with the option that he's chosen, it will have a little bit of patina. And they suggest, if you don't want that patina, to then galvanize and paint. And so we're going with the patina. At least that's what the spec in the packet will read.
And we'll work with the staff to make sure that we get as close as what you'd like.
Yeah, well, I think that the board would like it to be the least shiny alternative possible.
We will do that.
There's a good example of a house on that street that has very, very shiny roofing material. And it's been there for a while, and I thought it was going to kind of get dull at some point. And so far it has not.
You see it's from the space station.
So, let me see. Yes, Member Beachay.
Yeah, thank you for coming back, and thank you for taking our suggestions. I still am a little concerned about the stucco wall proposal. I don't think a stucco wall matches the house style at all. We had suggested a picket fence. I don't know if you were able to consider that, but I find that the stucco element and the wrought iron detail in the gate and the motorized vehicle gate not to be in keeping with the house style, which is quite light, a red brick house with white paint, which also currently has a small picket fence in one area near the back porch, I believe. Were you able to think about a picket fence?
Well, we're just thinking the maintenance of a wood picket fence.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be tremendous.
Yep.
We can certainly change the stucco color to a white if you'd like a different color.
No, I think it's the material that I object to, and I mean, the reality of a significant historical house is maintenance to some extent, or just no wall at all, which is pretty maintenance-free.
Yeah, but if you look at the report that the historical person did, there was other walls that were stucco.
On the street, yes, but not with this house or its twin. Yeah, thanks.
Does anyone else have a strong opinion or any type of opinion in reference to the wall? Yes. Member Aguilar-Medrano.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I also had the same concerns that you just expressed about the wall, and I've tried to catch myself up to date as best as possible about the last meeting. So the stucco struck me as a strange combination with the brick house. I do recognize that there's a house on a separate block that also has that combination. But looking at this block in particular, no other house on this side of the block has a wall. And then in addition to that, the stucco I thought was strange. But then when I further looked at the site plan, the other thing I wanted to point out to my fellow board members are there are 2 trees on the south side. The one on the west side is a very significant tree, and it's right adjacent to the sidewalk. So as the site plan currently shows the yard wall, there's no, I see that you have a note there that the tree is to remain in place, but there's no way that that wall could be constructed as it's shown and that tree not be damaged to the point where I think it would die. And so I have a major concern there. And just to put it into perspective for board members, if you look at that tree, the canopy isn't accurately represented in this. It's roughly 45 feet wide, so it's a very large tree. I would say the trunk diameter is close to 30 inches, if not more. It nearly reaches the corner of the house, just to put in perspective how large that tree is. So I guess I'm in favor of there not being a wall at all for the reasons I stated. But I would say that if the applicant were open to the picket fence that was proposed in the last meeting, picket fence could be installed without having to remove this tree. It would just need to be further set back from the sidewalk or stop before the tree, or there would need to be some sort of notch out, which the notch out wouldn't be my preference in breaking that fence pattern. And then I did want to just point out that there was a motorized gate. I didn't see that in the summary, so just pointing that out to my fellow board members. I saw that there was a note about the manufacturer design, but I didn't see any sort of design included in the submittal. I see in the section here, it appears to just be a solid gate. So I'm not sure what the design of that gate is or what the material is, so some further clarification on that would be needed. And then agree with staff that with the condition that the wrought iron be blackened and not painted. And I guess depending on what the proposed design is for that motorized gate, I would have that same possible concern of if painting it is the most appropriate approach.
Would the board consider us getting the staff approval of the motorized gate?
Madam Chair, does staff want to speak to that?
I would like to hear your comments, sir, in reference to, first of all, the brick wall, the wall. Either, could you comment in reference to what these two board members have just commented on? If they feel that the wall that is being proposed now is not in harmony or is not appropriate with the design of the house?
Well, we're open to changing it to a picket fence.
Okay.
We just need to start moving on this project. We've been wanting to get going since January.
And what about, can you give us a little bit more, can you tell us more about the design of the motorized gate? Would you describe that?
Well, it would be wrought iron, and it'd have vertical members, and there'd have to be some diagonal ones to give it some strength. And there'll be a roller on the bottom. It would roll.
And the vertical members and diagonal members, are those going to be made out of?
Wrought iron.
Wrought iron.
Similar to the picture that we had up on the screen. Can you bring that back up? You see the gate here on this detail?
Mm-hmm. Any other comments, board members?
So we would be open to a picket fence. That's
Thank you.
the wishes of the board.
Anyone from the public wishing to comment? We have one person coming down.
Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
My name is John Eddy. My address is P.O. Box 845, Tesuque, New Mexico, 87574. Thank you, Madam Chair. Welcome, new board members. I really appreciate the fact that you're here, putting in your time. I am so grateful that you have identified issues with the stucco wall, and I think that will be resolved, and I would assume that if they bring picket plans to staff, perhaps they could be administratively approved. I don't know, I leave that to you. But I think it would be clear in your motion that would be necessary. The additional concern of that wall, which may not even be in the back of your mind, is the fact that there is another house, which we have referred to as the twin, loosely. And I think I'm correct to state that there is no stucco wall in front of that house. Is that correct, staff? She says that's correct. So, again, that's one more argument for not allowing a stucco wall. I really appreciate your diligence in picking up that detail. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Eddy. Anyone else wishing to comment on this particular project? And board members, if you have no further comments or no further questions, I will entertain a motion, and remember there is an exception, and that has to do with replacement of historic fabric, and that is referring to the porch. And in your motion, please be very specific about any item changes that you are making. Member Beechey.
Madam Chair, before we have a motion, I guess I have a remaining question for the applicant. If the picket fence design is acceptable, what would be your proposal for the vehicular gate? Would that remain? I don't see how a wrought iron gate could be attached to a picket fence.
Well, we would put pickets on the gate. It would be built out of metal, and then we would put pickets on the front of it. It would appear similar to the fence.
I can't really picture that, but, I mean, it seems like maybe it should also be wood.
Well, the pickets would be wood, and they would be attached to the metal wrought iron gate behind it. That would be moving.
Madam Chair, Member Beechey, what might be, because we're not looking at a detail, your motion could include for a detail to be submitted to staff. That includes an elevation of the picket fence and the motorized gate, so we can make sure it's in harmony.
So were you going to make a motion? Member Beechey?
I can try to do that. Sorry. In case number 2022-005790 HDRB at 532 Don Gaspar Avenue, I move to approve the application, noting that the exception criteria for the replacement of the porch have been met, and with the following conditions. With respect to number one, that the replacement of the historic roof material with the new galvanized individual shingle be as dull in appearance as possible. In the galvanized metal described, not painted, and designed to patina. That all the non-historic windows be replaced with double-hung wood windows or fixed windows to match what is there. That all historic windows are allowed to be replaced if they've been rated unsatisfactory per your window assessment. All others shall be repaired, restored. And that with respect to item number 6, that the concrete masonry stuccoed wall has been denied, but the board would agree with a staff approval of a replacement wooden picket fence painted white with a matching gate, pedestrian gate, and a motorized or not vehicular gate that matches that fence style with minimal metal elements.
Member Aguilar Medrano. Are you seconding the motion?
Madam Chair, I want to ask for a friendly amendment to the motion.
I would suggest that you second the motion so that we can go forward, and then you can still add the amendment.
I will Aguilar Medrano. I will second the motion and would add the friendly amendment that the picket fence be placed as such that the mature trees are not harmed.
I accept that as friendly, and I guess I might also amend my motion to specify the height not be greater than 4 feet.
Thank you. Anything else? Any other friendly amendments? Yes. Member Larson.
Just a clarification, did we address the back west porch removal and approval?
I did state that the exception criteria have been met.
Okay, thanks.
Anything further?
Our intentions are to keep that tree, keep all the trees.
Roll call vote, please.
Member Aguilar Medrano?
Yes.
Member Berkeley?
Yes.
Member Beechey?
Yes.
Member Bienvenu?
Yes.
Member Larson?
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you, and I want to thank you also for your cooperative spirit that you've shown this evening and that you've worked with staff and the board.
Thank you
Which
very
is
much.
gracias. Thank you.
We appreciate it.
We will move on to new business. We have 4 cases under new business, and the first one is located at 4 Plaza Fatima. And that is Angela's case. Yes, Angela.
Good evening, members of the board and the public. This first case of mine is case number 2022-05792. It appears to have 2020 up on the screen. The address is 4 Plaza Fatima, which is in the downtown and historic East Side Historic District. Plaza Fatima is located off Delgado Street, there in the circled red in the lower left corner. Plaza Fatima is a 580 square foot residence listed as contributing to the downtown and East Side Historic District. It's located in the circular Plaza Fatima compound with a center garden and a shared gravel driveway. That's what you're seeing in the upper photograph. The photograph below is what you see upon approach of this house. It was built in the vernacular Spanish Pueblo style in the 1920s. It is 10 feet and 4 inches with a flat roof. Its windows are a variety of single and multi-lake casement and fixed windows. The north elevation windows appear to have been added, but the date is not definitive. And that would be this north elevation window, the upper left elevation existing. The house's entrance features a multi-light French door behind a decorative wood screen. The front door opening extends to a front 4-panel wood casement within the same opening. There have been no major exterior alterations to the building. It has remained unchanged since the 1950s when the current owners bought it. The south elevation's combined window and door, and the east elevation's single 4-panel multi-light wood casements, which are behind the tree on the lower right photograph, help to define the simple vernacular character of the house. The 6 feet stucco yard wall is the lower left photograph, extends across the east elevation and closes the backyard courtyard. The wall is believed to have been constructed after 1984, which is when the Historic Building Survey was written. At 6 feet, it is highly unlikely that it was built before 1972 or 3. Other yard walls in varying heights in the plaza compound were added since the 1980s based on surveys of the other 4 casitas in the Plaza Fatima compound. The applicant requests historic status review and primary facade designation as applicable. Staff recommends the historic status of the structure be maintained as contributing per 14-5.2C, designation of significant and contributing structures, and that the east and south facades, respectively 1 and 2, be designated primary facades. Staff recommends that the yard wall be designated non-contributing based on its tall height and age. And that concludes my report. I stand for questions.
Thank you, Angela. Any clarification questions or any other type of questions for Angela? If there's not, applicant or applicants, please come forward.
He's already been sworn in.
Oh, thank you. And I will indicate that we cannot discuss possible future plans. We are simply wanting, this is a designation, a historic designation in primary facades. And, yes, sir.
We are, I heard what you said, Madam Chair, and I won't delve into details. intent of this renovation that we'll be proposing, that you'll be hearing in the future, is not to change the massing or the area of the building. It's to breathe new life into it, to make it more livable. It's essentially falling apart. There's vines growing through the inside of it. Some of the windows, we love this old building. Our client loves it. His family's owned it since the 1950s. They intend to continue to use it. We want to make it more functional. Our intention is not to change it in any significant way. We've been led to believe, and there's been communication, that the owner, prior to engaging us, did have a meeting with David Rast related to a designation. David had indicated that the portions of the building facing the public way, primarily the north facade, was the contributing facade. The entire development is one of those wonderful schemes in Santa Fe where there's public access, there's a driveway, and then everyone's private spaces are in the back, and there's a public face to the building. I'm adding this not to contest anything that Angela's presenting, just to present some of the history related to this project with the owner.
So you or the owner rather, agree with Angela's assessment of having the east and the south facades primary and having the building made contributing?
We will not contest that. We would, at our next hearing, we would seek some exceptions to give the building new life. It's tiny little space. We just want to bring some life into the building.
You're not disagreeing with what Angela has
I
done?
think Angela's done a great job in assessing the project.
Okay.
There was a previous assessment, and we understand that our evaluation is different based on different criteria, and we're not going to contest.
Thank you. Board members, any questions for the applicant? Or any comments? Yes, Member Aguilar Medrano.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a question about the yard wall. I'm a bit confused about the possible date of construction. In the summary, it states that it's believed to be constructed after 1984, after the historic building survey, but then the proposal letter from the applicant states that the wall has been there as long as the owners have had it, which is in the 1950s. So can you provide some clarification on that wall? The reason I ask is if it has in fact been there since the 1950s, I'm wondering if we should consider the status of that wall as well.
The owner has indicated that they've never added anything to it. They've never changed it. The assessment of when it was constructed is not something that we added or is based on any knowledge that we have or that the owner has. He describes it as remembering it from the 50s when he was a kid.
So in other words, that wall is also historic?
It's from
that?
original from the time frame.
Okay.
We're not here to contest anything.
Okay, thank you very much.
Leslie,
Thank you for your question. Anything else? Anyone from the public wishing to comment on this particular case? It appears not. I will entertain a motion. Member from Vineyard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a clarification first from Angela. Where was the information from that the wall likely dated from an earlier or from a more recent era?
Member Bienvenu, that is from that 1984 survey.
And do you know what the basis was for that judgment?
I don't.
You mentioned the height of the wall as being different than the historic heights in the compound.
Right. There's no information on the exact date
So would you
by
accept,
any of the surveyors.
would you accept the possibility then, or the probability that the wall is in fact historic and could be designated contributing?
Yes, I do. in absence of definitive history on it.
I'll make a motion. In case 2022-005792 HDRB for Plaza Fatima, based on staff's report and the information presented today in the record, I would move that the building's status be maintained as contributing, and that the east and south facades 1 and 2 be designated primary, and that the yard wall be designated contributing as well.
We hear a second.
Aguilar Madrano seconds.
Anything further? Roll call vote, please.
Member Aguilar Medrano?
Yes.
Member Berkeley?
Yes.
Member Beachside?
Yes.
Member Bienvenu?
Yes.
Member Larson?
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you very much, sir. And we move on to the next case located at 906.5 Don Miguel Place. May we hear that report, please?
Yes.
And that's yours too, Angela.
Thank you, Chair. This is case number 2022-005793 is a remodel and addition proposed of 906.5 Don Miguel Place. Place is off of Camino Don Miguel. So this is the site plan, existing and proposed. This house is a single-family residence constructed in 1951, designated non-contributing to the downtown and east side historic district. The house is single-story, flat-roofed, with parapets in the Spanish Pueblo Revival style. It was extensively remodeled in the 1970s when all the windows and doors were replaced and clear-story windows were added. You can see the clear-story windows in the existing south elevation on the top of this slide. An addition was added in 1998. The residents accessed the front door from Santander Lane, which I believe is V Hill Lane. No, it is Santander. Santander, not V Hill, which we discussed on a field trip today. To correct that. The applicant proposes to add a 404 square foot studio to the southwest elevation at the same height as the house, which is 13 feet 6 inches. The south elevation will have 2x5 light French door and a small 10x10 overhang that has a metal roof, burnished slate. Its west elevation will be 2x3 light. New windows will be aluminum clad wood, and stucco will be the same as the existing, which is buckskin. The applicant has proposed to replace the existing arched wooden gate and stucco surround with a rectangular gate and a surround in the north elevation stucco wall. And that's pictured on the lower right, existing. The new gate would be rusted metal with a wood frame stained dark brown. The applicant is proposing that to discuss with the board tonight, and then remains part of his proposal. The applicant also proposes to replace the existing low wooden arched gate on the inner courtyard, which is behind the yard wall that you see depicted, same yard wall, but the, I'd say east side of that wall, with a new gate to match the proposed gate on the north elevation. That gate's within the courtyard inside, behind the wall. Approval of the proposed project with the condition that the sliding glass doors are divided light if found to be publicly visible, and finds that the application complies with section 14-5.2D, the general design standards for all historic districts, and 14-5.2E, the downtown and east side design standards. And with that, I stand for questions.
Any questions for Angela, board members? It appears not, Angela. May we have the applicant or applicants get sworn in?
You swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give Is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I will, I do, yes.
Thank you. State your name and address for the record.
Richard Martinez, Martinez Architecture Studio, P.O. Box 925, Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Hi, Richard. What do you have to tell us about this project?
A couple of things. We don't intend to affect the house in any way. What we'd like to do is to add a studio for the owner, who is an artist and has a studio in her house right now. She's owned this house, but she lives nearby, and she's going to move back into this house, which is very nice. And so we're just adding a very small 400 square foot, basically 400 square foot addition as a studio for her. It's so small that the one swinging door has to open out so we can fit all the furniture into the space. And the sliding glass door that we have doesn't have any dividers because the windows and doors on the house don't have any dividers. And so I was trying to not make it stand out in that little courtyard. But otherwise, the doors and windows that are on the outside of the studio do have dividers because they don't face in and they're more publicly visible. These are not on the street. They're in the yard still, but it's where they will come in and park, and perhaps there will be some guests that will come in and park as well. Besides this addition, which is, again, is no taller than the house itself, we would like to make the existing arched doorways square, not any taller, but we'd like to take away the archedness and make it square so that it's more open, so that we have more opening to the street, and make it one door instead of two doors where it is now, because they're very small and you sort of have to duck because you're not coming in the middle right now when you open one side of an arch, but it would be a rectangular door, one leaf, so that it opens wide and it opens onto the street. And we would like to repeat that motif on the other gates that we have inside of the yard as well. With that, I stand in for any questions.
So you are proposing, on this picture that we are seeing here to the right, you are proposing to make that, are you changing that arch?
Yes, the arch, the existing elevation is on top. You can see the photograph of it down below. And what we propose is in the middle, which is to take that arch and make it no taller than it is right now, but make it square and make one leaf of the gate rather than two leaves of the gate.
And the gate that you're proposing will be metal?
It's a metal frame. I tried to illustrate that. It's a metal frame around the sides, and it's wood boards inside of the metal frame.
Okay, thank you. Other questions or comments, board members? Yes, Carly.
Madam Chair, members of the board, so I believe we had a little discussion on the board field trip today regarding the change to the gate. Angela had mentioned something about that maybe being pulled back, and this is at my comments earlier based on to make a change in a wall per 14-5.2A6, if a wall is non-conforming, if it is beyond the maximum wall height, then anytime you're making a single change into that wall, you're required to bring it into conformance. And I believe this is over the maximum allowable height for the streetscape, and that would require them to bring the entire wall down in height. And I don't know exactly what that height is, if Angela might have it, but otherwise, that's the catch on this part of the proposal.
So in other words, if you don't change the arch, then it can go forward because you're not doing any changes. But if you want to change, then then the wall has to come back before the board to be in conformance with the streetscape.
So the board could make it part of their requirement that they bring it down to the maximum allowable height now if we have that height. But otherwise, it does have to come into compliance if they're making a change. If they're not making a change to it, that change is where it triggers 14-5.2A6.
I understand what Carly is saying. My understanding is that if you're making the wall more non-compliant with the existing regulations, then it requires. What we're doing is not making it more non-compliant. We're making it the same height, the same width. We're just squaring up the arch. And actually, that means a larger opening to the street. So it doesn't mean that we are making it in any way less compliant or more out of regulations than it is right now.
Madam Chair, that's not the way the code reads. It has to come fully into compliance.
And Attorney Rubali, do you agree with Carly?
I do, except I would note that if the new construction is non-compliant, the applicant would have to conclusively demonstrate.
Speak right into that mic. It's hard to hear you.
If a reconstruction of a non-compliant element of a property is non-compliant with the Historic District Code, the board would have to approve exceptions. So the applicant would have to conclusively demonstrate the exceptions under D9, and there are 6 exceptions for height variations. There are 3 exceptions for other design variations, but height variations are difficult and they require the applicant to conclusively demonstrate 6 exceptions.
And sorry, Madam Chair, I think your mic was not very close when you just said that you agree and add that information. Is that right?
Thank you both. Do you have anything further? Richard? Anything else? Member Beachside?
Just a question about your interpretation of the code. The section on nonconforming structures, which doesn't call out walls specifically. I think our code has a weakness in addressing walls, but it does call out structures. And it says that no alteration or repair may be made to any such structure other than its removal. So I'm sort of wondering if they just were to remove the arch, would that be compliant with the code and not?
It would be, if any change is made to that structure, the entirety has to be brought back into conformance. In this case, you're referring to removal, but a wall or fence that is constructed to the maximum allowable height, that would remove the material that made it non-compliant. So that's one way to interpret that, too.
Would that be allowed?
That would be that's generally how we deal with the walls. And this section doesn't necessarily say walls. It says structures, but in our code, in the height sections, in the streetscape section, under heights, that's where it also refers to walls. So there's a path through the code that will get you to walls.
Okay, and just to be clear, in case the applicant finds this a possibility, if they remove the arch and replace the gate, would that be allowed without having to bring the wall down in height?
Not in my interpretation of the code, no.
If I may, if the problem is the height, then the height issue has to be brought into compliance with the code. As I understand it, the problem is not the design, that is the arch. There's no problem with an arch. The problem is it's too tall under the code, so whatever they do, if they're changing that arch, it has to be brought into compliance with the height restrictions, or exception criteria have to be proved.
Okay. But if the arch is the highest part of the wall and it is removed, and that brings it to the allowable height, that might be considered.
It's if any changes made to the structure, the entirety has to be brought into conformance.
Okay.
And
If-
so-
yeah.
Yeah, and we can look at, with non-conforming, if you're making an addition onto a house, a lot of times the board will see non-conforming windows, non-divided lights, and maybe see that, well, there is an addition, they're doing just this addition, removing all the windows on this entire house is materially costly and wasteful. And so the board has had seen that as something that's to their satisfaction. And that's also the code reading is to the satisfaction, not the satisfaction, that's not the exact language, but basically to the satisfaction of the board.
Okay.
The example given of replacing the windows in a house is, would be true if you were replacing all the windows. There are some windows that can be replaced. We are not, in this case, making this gate any taller than it is, and the code does allow that gates can be as tall as they need to be. They have nothing to do with the height of the wall. It's the gate itself.
Right. With respect to the divided lights, I just wanted to add that this house has only undivided light windows, and I think that for the sake of harmony with the house itself and the property, that keeping the windows in the same style as the existing structure on the addition would be a better match than trying to have some divided and some not.
Yes. Okay, and also I just want to mention that we have no plans and no budget to lower this wall, and so if it's not allowed that we can change the gate without lowering the wall, we will do none of it. So it's just I would like to change the gate, but if I can't, I can't.
So, Richard, did I hear that there are some divided lights on this house?
I don't believe there are.
There are 0 divided
Yes,
lights.
right. It's as I drew it on the existing elevations, and I don't think that there are any divided lights in any of the sides of the house.
Okay. So I'm hearing the attorney say any changes made to that gate, to the gate, it incorporates into the wall, so you'd have to come back with exceptions if you want that proposal. That's what I am understanding the attorney to say, or unless you just want to keep it as is.
Well, if the choice is either lower the wall or leave the gate as it is, we'll leave the gate as it is.
Member Benvenu.
Madam Chair. So let me pursue this just a bit with Carly and Frank, if I could. So the A6 says the no non-conforming building may be added to or altered in any way unless the proposed addition or alteration will bring the whole to a degree of conformity acceptable to the board. So wouldn't one avenue that could solve the problem be to permit the change with a finding that it is acceptable to the board, rather than come back for an exception?
I think the issue there is to be acceptable to the board. I don't know that there's any criteria to say what is acceptable and what is not.
Right, that would just have to be a finding based on the board's judgment.
And
Otherwise, that provision would be meaningless.
Madam Chair and Member Benvenu, it also assumes that it depends on what the board finds tonight, if that discussion, if you find that that is allowable. Now, I think it's important to remember that this portion of the code we often find really high yard walls that never came before the board. They, kind of change a bit of the character of our entire district, discretionary over time. And this is one tool that the code has to bring these back down into in that realm. If you assume that either you would be approving an exception, and that's to the board's satisfaction, to the board's, if using the word satisfaction, but if that satisfies the board, then, I suppose yes.
Okay.
Let me hear from Heather.
Rios, thank you. Member Bienvenue. So there's another section of the code that applies and is operative in this situation. And, legal nonconforming structure may be modified in ways to eliminate or reduce the degree or extent of nonconformity. One could argue that the proposed treatment is going to be lower than the arch, including the demolition or removal of a nonconforming feature for any reason, but it cannot be reconstructed except in conformance with Chapter 14. And part and parcel of Chapter 14 are our height regulations as found in the Historic Districts Ordinance. And so it certainly is within the purview of the board to find differently, but an exception wouldn't have to be requested to the code to permit that. So that would be the only avenue in which you could consider this particular case. And they would have to come back with an exception and a finding of criteria and justification.
Are you pondering that, Member Bienvenue?
What was the citation to the provision you were referring to?
The code citation is section 14-10.3.
Oh.
Non-conforming structures that applies not only in the historic districts but throughout the city. So then we refer back to the historic districts with the height provisions. But certainly it is within the purview of the board to find that this is acceptable, but an exception would have to be requested.
And that would require a separate notice procedure, correct, for exceptions?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay, so that's something that you probably need to discuss with your clients. But in the meantime, I'll ask for public comment, and it looks like one person is ready to comment. That's you, Mr. Eddy, and you've been sworn in.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm sorry this has gotten you into the weeds, because I think you're in the weeds here. I want to offer a potential solution. I think one of the difficulties that they're having with this gate is that you have to open up both leaves of the gate to comfortably go in without banging your head on the arch. If this gate were replaced in kind by a single leaf gate that swung open, giving you complete access through the archway, would this not only fulfill their needs on that property, and could this be possibly acceptable to the board as a solution which would keep them from having to bring down the entire height of their wall? Now, I'm sorry if I'm complicating things, but this, to me, seems like a very simple solution. Here, thank you.
There's something else for you to think about, Richard. Anyone else from the public wishing to comment on this case? Richard, tell us what you and your clients think. What avenue do you think you're going to take?
We will not do anything to the wall if we are not allowed to do this.
And not do anything to the gate?
Not do anything to the gate, right? Yes.
Okay, so what Mr. Eddy suggested, could you just have...
We'll consider that, but we're not proposing that at this point. So I'll come back if we get back to
Okay.
it. Yes.
Okay, board members. I will entertain a motion. I'll give you 10 seconds to contemplate.
Sorry, Madam Chair. I'm not trying to be difficult, but it just really doesn't make sense to me that we couldn't, I mean, what I was proposing is just eliminating the masonry arch altogether so that you only have a gate that's squared off like you wanted. I don't know if that's acceptable to the applicant or not, but that seems to reduce the nonconformity to me. So I'm not really clear why that wouldn't be allowed if that's something the applicant.
I think because they're taking the entire wall height into consideration. But comments?
Getting shorter. But anyway,
As I read the code, if they alter the gate so that the result is in conformity with the height restriction, then the board doesn't apply subsection A6 regarding non-conforming structures. That is, they're complying with section A6 by bringing the non-conforming structure into conformity. And therefore, an exception would not be required.
So what Jennifer just suggested, are you saying that that would bring it into conformance, taking off the arch and just putting a gate?
If the only problem is that the arch is too tall, okay, and they would have to get a height exception to build a new arch at the same height. If they're taking off the arch and reducing the height so that the new height is in conformity with the streetscape, which is an average of yard walls and fences on the streetscape, then an exception would not be required. And they would be compliant with section A6 because they're turning a non-conforming structure into a conforming structure.
Can I comment, please? My understanding of the code is that the arch is not non-compliant. It is because you're allowed to increase the height over gates in order to make arches or lintels or things like that on top of the gate. In speaking with my client just now, we would be amenable to modifying our design of the gate and making leaving the arch, the stucco arch that's there, and making one gate in the design that I have proposed, but not square, but an arched top gate.
Yes, Member Aguilar Medrano.
I have a question for the applicant. Just a technical thing. These elevations are missing dimensions, so it's hard to refer to heights and widths here. But what is the width of the existing gate? And if you were to replace that with a single gate, what would the width of that be?
I believe that's 4 feet. Between 3.6 and 4 feet, it's like 3.9 feet wide. So it's not too wide to have a single leaf.
It strikes me a bit on the wider side. I like the proportion of the double doors myself, just so my fellow board members know where I stand with this. I think I'm in favor of keeping the arch and the gates as is. And just to clarify, even if it were squared off, that's not reducing the height of the gate portion of the wall at all. That's simply taking the highest point of the arch and squaring it off. So we're not reducing the height in any way. But I would be in favor of keeping it as is.
Anything else? If not, I will entertain a motion, please. Yes, Member Larson, the courageous Member Larson.
I'll give it a go, as we usually say. In case 2022-005793 HDRD 906.5 Don Miguel Place, I move that we approve the project as of her staff's recommendation, finding that the sliding glass doors are undivided and are not publicly visible, as verified by the applicant's presentation, and that the arched wooden gate be replaced in kind, slightly modified to be a single arch joining what is now currently 2 leaves, in the style that was proposed with a metal frame and vertical wood plank.
Is there a second to this motion? Member Bienvenu.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would second and ask for a friendly amendment that the addition, that the corners on the addition have a radius at least in the same degree as the existing house.
Accepted as friendly.
Member Beechey.
Also, a suggestion for a friendly amendment that the windows on the studio addition may be undivided.
Thank you. Yes, the windows may be undivided.
Anything else? Roll call vote, please.
Member Aguilar Medrano.
No.
Member Berkeley.
Yes.
Member Beechey.
Yes.
Member Bienvenu.
Yes.
Member Larson.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you.
Very much.
Thank you, Richard. We move on to the next case, which is located at 1000 Canyon Road. And may we have this report, please? And it's also Angeles. This is a contributing house.
I could just get the packet out for this case, because this is a different case. Okay. Please pardon the delay. This case is 2022-005598 for 1000 Canyon Road. Some of you have become familiar with this house in its previous case, which was a status evaluation and primary facade designation. The board voted to designate the south facade, the north facade, the front of the house, primary. I'm going to toggle a little here between my slides and my report. So you're looking at the aerial of the site at the corner junction of Acequia Madre and Canyon Road. So 1000 Canyon Road is an 850 square foot, one-story, long and narrow adobe structure built between 1929 and 1934, which is designated contributing to the downtown and the East Side Historic District. It's a simple rectangular residence built in the Spanish Pueblo vernacular style with a flat roof, metal canales, and adobe walls with a rounded parapet. It sits at the east property line of the driveway easement that leads to the neighboring houses, which are south of the lane. Its front entrance faces Canyon Road, where Acequia Madre merges into Canyon Road. So I want to show you on the slides. Four elevations and photo of the house. The front and then the north elevation features its original T-shaped door and window configuration, where the door is flanked by two connected windows, each of which are 6-light wood casements. This simple configuration that combines one door and two windows in one opening versus 3 is common. It's common in vernacular buildings in the downtown and east side historic district. The house is relatively low height. Another of its distinctive vernacular features is 10 feet at its north-facing elevation, and decreases to 7 feet 6 inches at the back of the house. So this is actually the short end of the house towards the south. Its east elevation has a small wooden porch with a sloped overhang roof on its south end with the below-grade entrance. Also on the east elevation are 3 windows, a multi-light steel casement in the middle and 2 vinyl casement windows on each side. Back to this photograph. This photograph is the east elevation and shows this sunken-in porch below grade and these 3 windows referred to. These are non-historic vinyl windows. This center window is a steel casement. Other alterations are not evident in city records, though it underwent the window replacement. It's not on the National or State Register. However, the city's historic building status map indicates it's contributing, and 2003 HICP indicates that it's contributing to the Santa Fe Historic District. Its historic character and integrity are expressed through its simple rectangular building envelope, low height, flat roof, and siting where Resequia Madre merges with Canyon Road. The house's scale, an original low adobe wall with stone base that lines the acequia are characteristic of historic Canyon Road. In particular, the north elevation's front entry T-shaped door and window configuration continues to convey its original historic presence. As I stated in an earlier board meeting, the board designated the main house's north elevation and its its primary facade, and the rear building, also its north elevation primary. And the board at that meeting also designated the front yard wall contributing. The current proposal the applicant has brought before you is to replace the front window and doors on the north elevation. The current door is wood with glazing and is flanked by windows on each side, and the applicant proposes to replace both with a new door and windows in the existing openings to match existing materials and design in kind, essentially. The applicant has provided a window and door assessment that recommends replacement because the existing are beyond repair with rotting jambs and wood frames that are structurally unsound. The applicant requests, therefore, an exception to Section 14-5.2D, Number 1, little a, for removing historic material. Exception criteria responses are included in this report. I'm going to show you the photographs of those windows and doors. This is the current condition of the rear below grade porch. That's one of the proposed changes from a door to a window. And these are deteriorated windows and doors the applicant's proposing to replace. This is the front door from the inside and shows that it is, according to the assessment, and I agree, unrepairable and requires replacement or warrants replacement. Just to show you through the elevations, these are the existing elevations. They're a little hard to see, but the existing match the photographs that I just showed you. That bottom, you'll see those 3 existing windows. The proposed changes are to add these windows. Thank you. So the proposed changes are to remove this window and this window and this window and replace them with true divided light windows, including the center window, and add a window here. So it's in net 2 more windows. And I'll point out that the board did not designate this as a primary facade, so this is not where the exception applies. And the below-grade porch is to become a new door. And on the west elevation, the proposal is to add 2 windows and to add an additional window at the back south side. Let's see. Let me go back to my staff report and my recommendation. Adding new outdoor lighting on the south elevation. It consists of 2 Mexican tin and glass lanterns from Artesanos, which he refers to as the Gordo fixture, on each side of the door and windows, and to restucco the entire building with cementitious buckskin by El Rey. The applicant also proposes to add a patio wall at the rear south elevation to match the height of the existing garden wall in the back on the south elevation to enclose a 12 by 17 feet garden space. And the wall will have locally made wooden gates with window shutters and a Mexican tin and glass light at the gate entry. No changes are proposed for the garage building. I'll go back to my. Oops. Show you through the rest of the slides. This is the existing window. This is actually a vinyl window. This is the proposed. This is the color scheme, the proposed lighting, the stucco, window types. And with that, staff recommends approval of the proposed design, finding that the applicant has met all the criteria, and the board may find otherwise, but otherwise staff does recommend approval of the proposal consistent with the general design standards for all H districts and the downtown and east side historic design standards.
Thank you, Angela. Angela, will the new windows have that framing surround as shown on the left-hand side?
The pediment that we're looking at on that. I believe so. I believe that those are being replaced. I think that needs clarification here today.
Okay. Well, I'll ask the applicant.
Okay.
Any other questions? Member Beachside?
Was the wall height, allowable wall height calculation performed for this property?
For the rear property, no, because the patio wall is, I believe it's 4 feet, and it's not going any higher than that.
Oh, sorry, I thought...
And it's 20 feet within that property. It's like off the property line, so they can go higher. When they're 20 feet, they can be...
Oh, it's not, it's 20 feet back from the property line.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is any lighting being proposed for this project?
Yes, Charios, the lighting, exterior lighting are these. You can tell, if I can enlarge it a little bit. The Mexican tin with glass.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? It appears not. Would the applicant kindly get sworn in?
Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yeah.
Thank you. Please speak into the mic and state your name and address for the record.
Thomas Ortiz, Tom Ortiz Design.
52 Condesa Road, San Antonio, New Mexico, 87508. Good evening. I think
Sir? You can use this microphone if you need to.
Thanks. They don't have the sort of the sort of more elongated presentation that I had with regard to how we arrived at the sort of this humble design, and I think that maybe showing that show the intention. So. Well, I mean, some of the, I was hoping that, sorry, I put together a fairly extensive presentation which showed some historical images of that particular property as well as other farming houses in that same area at a particular time where, you know, this isn't a Cassidy compound sort of house. It's a very humble house. It was at one time a much larger property that had, eventually as the family grew, the houses grew behind it, and the fields grew smaller. But, so here, this is kind of showing the intersection at Acequia Madre and Canyon Road. This is the building right across the street, which at one point was an adobe barn. And then this photo here is a building that was under construction 1947 at 600 Canyon Road, showing the sort of simplicity and very sort of humble architectural details that went into those sorts of houses in that area. I think sometimes it's better to read some of these sort of simpler designs if we're looking at the massing with just punctures, because that's really the two things that, you know, really make up this small house is the solution to the punctures and keeping them simple and straightforward and making them all consistent. So all of the new windows, there's basically 3 different size windows throughout the house. They are the exact same size as the windows that are there, with exception to the metal window, which is no longer operable. And we're replacing that with also a wood window with an aluminum powder-coated exterior with wood interior with true divided lights, and it's paintable on the inside. In terms of I think Angela had mentioned it, we're maintaining the we really like the elevation of that front door with the 2 small windows on the side, sort of a T-shape. And we will be having that produced by a local door manufacturer. It'll be made out of wood, and it'll be wood on the outside as well as the inside, painted to match all the other additional windows that we're recommending. I think that's it.
Any questions for Mr. Ortiz? Yes, Member Bienvenu.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Do you have photographs with you of this property, historic photographs? Can you show them?
It's best for you to speak into the mic so everything is recorded.
Is this not able to be shown on the Elmo? Okay, why don't we do that?
I think that it is.
This is what was shown, I guess, before. Are these the only 3 photographs you have of the property?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
That was all.
I just wasn't clear, though. I can see the one across the street. Are one of the other two photos of this exact house?
Sorry. This one here is just to show, this is a new house under construction in 1947. It's 600 Canyon Road.
Okay.
It's to show an example of the sort of typical vernacular architecture that was being built by, local people there that were farming or, living there.
Well, the reason I was asking is because it's just not clear to me what's historic on this property and what isn't. I thought if you had photographs, I could clear some of that up. I'm particularly focused on the east elevation. It's one that I think is extremely striking, even though we didn't designate it as primary. I think it easily could have been a primary facade. But what I don't really know about that elevation is exactly how old some of the features are. I mean, the steel window is clearly historic. The pediment, the placement of the windows is probably historic, if not original, the openings. I'm wondering about the pediments, the territorial style pediments over the windows. And I'm also wondering about the portals, how old they are, because they're, as you're describing, very humble efforts at territorial style, but extremely typical of that style of building, and for that to still be on Canyon Road in such a visible location, I think is something to be protected, if at all possible, regardless of whether or not it's the primary facade.
Can we pull up the photo of that window just to show you? There was an assessment by Ray Patterson on those windows, and the pediments around the vinyl windows were an addition. Typically, that detail is plastered into the stucco. These protrude out beyond it. It was probably a very inexpensive way when somebody put up those vinyl windows to create a frame. The north facade, the pediment within that window is stuccoed into the architecture. So it's recessed, and so we're planning on retaining that. But we felt that keeping the other, and that's the reason why I showed you the photo of the 1947 construction of the house, is that, they didn't really gild the lily, in these houses, and they kept things very, very simple.
Sure.
So the pediments, the assessment that Ray had given regarding the east side vinyl windows, those were just tacked onto the stucco.
So those windows themselves are clearly not historic, and it actually makes sense. What you're hypothesizing is that the pediment detailing was just a way, when those windows were installed, to hide the gap, essentially.
Correct.
So they wouldn't be historic either, most likely. Okay.
And that is in the window assessment by Ray Patterson.
What about the portal? What do we know about the?
Interesting thing about the portal is we don't know the history of it, but it extends over the property line right now. When the property was divided up by the family, that now extends over into what is the easement. The easement is owned by the family that owns the very back part of the property. So everyone's been trying to sort of get that.
Oh.
It's also at a point where I think the dirt has built up on that street. I think at one point that doorway was at ground level, but as things have shifted through time, it's become the threshold is below grade, and we have flooding problems. So we have an issue of, we'd like to resolve and keep the water from pouring back.
That all makes sense to me. So just to save me the trouble, it's probably in the packet, and I just can't find it right now, but what's the window assessment on the steel windows on the east elevation? I understand it's not primary facade, so I suppose technically an exception is not necessary, but are they repairable?
Well, Ray did mention that they're not operable, and they're also single pane. It probably, it wasn't inherent, it wasn't original to the structure. And if we're trying to bring the whole house to a consistent level where it's an example of a particular type of architecture and time in that neighborhood, placing the steel window along with the vinyl windows. From what I understand on the designation for their last meeting was that that could be removed.
I'm just, for some reason, not finding the window assessment in the packet. I know it's here.
Anything further?
Oh, thank you.
Anyone else? Member Aguilar?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had the same questions as Member Bienvenu, but thank you for your explanation of the pediments, and I can see now a difference between the north and east facade. My question is what is the reason for the shutter on the south elevation? I ask just because it seems like each facade now has almost a different treatment of the windows. The north one is maintaining its pediments because it's primary. The east is removing them, and then we have this new shutter on the south. So I'm just wondering what is the reason for that?
I believe it's there's a particular name for those types of openings here in New Mexico, but it's specifically so that you could be in that courtyard space and get some ventilation in there, so you could, without having to have the gate open, you could open those shutters and be able to get some air circulation in that patio space and some security.
So do the other windows, how is that different than just opening like one of the other windows that probably has a screen?
These are just wooden shutters in a garden wall, and so if you open them, it's just opening.
There's no pane.
There's no
behind
window
it.
or anything yet.
I see. And then to clarify, I think you spoke to this a minute ago, but on page 3 of 5, when you're referring to the door, it just says will be painted and doesn't specify a color. So is it your intention to paint it to match the existing blue that's there?
Will be painted to match the new windows, and I have a paint sample from the north window showing that there's white paint under the blue paint.
Okay, so the north primary facade, you're proposing to change all of the trim colors to a shade of white.
I have a sample of that if you like.
That's all for now. Thank you. That's it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Member Beachard, did you have something?
I just was curious about the design details for the door that's being added on the south elevation. I didn't see that in the packet, the one that faces the courtyard.
Correct. It actually matches in design what will be we're going to replicate what it was on the front door on the back door. So there's a fixed panel, there's a wood panel on the bottom, and then at a certain point, then it becomes glazing. The glazing doesn't go all the way to the
Okay.
floor.
Yep. Thank you.
Yes. Member Berkeley.
I just had a question. Generally, you made a point in your packet of mentioning that you're adding all these windows because you wanted more light, but I wondered if anyone had considered skylights instead.
It's not just in terms of bringing light into it, but it's a fairly narrow house. I think it's maybe 12 and a half feet wide. There's the sense of wanting to create some being able to look outside and it's not just about bringing in skylights. And, I think there's these clients currently have a house on Camino. Sorry, but they have skylights in this particular house. And when we were discussing design solutions, they asked that we didn't put any skylights in.
Anything further, board members? If not, I will ask anyone from the public. Member Bienvenu.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just further clarification on this steel window. There actually isn't a window assessment, I don't think, on the east elevation, which probably makes sense because it's not a primary facade. Do you have any opinion, Angela, as to the age of the steel window?
Member Bienvenu, I believe that dates to the 50s. I would say the early 50s.
Okay.
Mid-century.
So it
Maybe
may not
earlier.
be original to the building.
No.
But it's historic, almost certainly, correct?
I believe so, yes.
No, I'm still a little fixated on that east facade. I think that the steel window is, we try to protect them whenever we can, and that one is highly distinctive on that facade. I'm just afraid that, just changing the entire facade to be very uniform with new windows is going to lose the historical integrity of that. That I think is very contributing to Canyon Road streetscape. So I do have concerns, and there's also sustainability issues with replacing that window.
Well, we'd like to get something that has a much higher R value and security value. When we were looking at all of the frames of all of the windows in this home, it was clear that there were wood frame windows in all of these, the vinyl windows as well as the metal windows. Because of the way that the wood jamb is integrated into the adobe, it showed that that's in the way that the metal window is attached as a new addition to, when they probably took out wood windows and they couldn't replace them with wood. The construction and the lentils around all of these are consistent. And typically in these sort of metal frame windows that you can see sometimes in some of MEM's more public buildings, the detailing around how you put a metal window onto a masonry structure, it doesn't normally have like a really wide wood windowsill, and that's what exists throughout the house. And I have photos of that if you need to see it. But that was the one reason that we were thinking that we'd like to bring all of the windows to like a consistent style.
Thank you. Let's hear from the public. Mr. Eddy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a challenging, it is very simple, this house, but the rub here is protecting the vernacular, as I see it. And this house has a tremendous amount of vernacular, not only appeal, but integrity, despite the fact that it may be a little bit confusing how that was achieved. As far as the casements are concerned, I would bemoan the removal of casements that are there, even though it could be argued that they're not as historical as they may have been on the south or the north elevations. But even more importantly to me personally, and the applicant has mentioned this, that he is going to try to maintain some of the color of these windows, but I think he also stated that he's going to change the color of the north facade door, the T doorway, which I strongly object to. Those colors as they stand now are a variation on Taos blue. Chairwoman will recognize that term as being a deep historical reference in Santa Fe. Not very many people recognize that anymore. And I think it's very, very important that the colors on this house be maintained as is for that reason. Thank you.
Anyone else from the public wishing to comment on this particular project? It appears not. Board members, do you have any? Yes, Member Larson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Eddy, for bringing up the vernacular style of the house. Typically, I agree with the consideration that we give to wooden windows or any other type of historical window should be applied to the steel casement windows as well. I think in the case of this building, since there is such a variety of periods represented, that I think it would be appropriate in this case to maybe replace that window in like if there happens to be flexibility with the applicant. I also really like the blue color, but I'm not certain, or I'm not completely familiar with the history of the colors of the windows and all that. And since it's such a small structure, that does strike me as, something that's defining of the house. And, I'd be curious if you'd considered maintaining that color, or if your strong preference is to modify it to be white.
Well, in looking at peeling away the paint from what's there, I think the blue period of windows came about at a time when, you know, I've included the reason I included the photo of 1947 at 600 Canyon Road is that there was a period of time where people weren't, you know, they weren't gilding the lily, as I said before. It was just very simple white, you know, white paint, brown stucco. And in doing an evaluation of this window, we did come to find that the paint underneath the blue paint was in fact white or not white. And that's how we arrived to that decision. The other reason for this is that these are manufactured windows that have a powder coat on them, and Taos blue is not something that, you know, is offered.
Okay, so I think the suggestion would be then to make the window a white color as what's available. I don't know if my board members have feelings about that, but I think, you know, that's something that I'm amenable to. And then regarding the replacement of that casement window, do you have a strong feeling about, you know, what type of window pattern we would replace that with, or would you be amenable to using a larger window?
The window that's in the elevations for replacement is a 3-bay window, which is similar in layout to the metal frame window, but it is, and in fact it is powder coated aluminum on the outside and wood on the inside. Are you suggesting that I do a metal window?
No, I apologize. I'm having trouble navigating the packet, so that's fine.
I think what she was suggesting is that you follow the window pattern. Correct?
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, so I imagine that, you know, I'm not as familiar with replacing a casement window, but, you know, I want to also reiterate that, like, normally when we're considering the replacement of casement windows, you know, I feel more strongly when there are multiples of those, you know, for the sake of sustainability and for, you know, being historically accurate and all of that and sensitive to the, you know, the time period. But I think in this case, like something like that, I'm willing to be more flexible with, and I think that echoes the sort of, you know, scale of what we currently have, and I think that's acceptable.
Anything further, board members? Pardon?
Could I ask Mr. Ortiz to put the photos that he showed Member Larson on on the projector, please?
So it's part of the packet.
Well, did you show Member Larson some colors of windows? I thought.
No, he just indicated that in peeling the blue color that it was white underneath.
Whatever he showed Member Larson, if he would put that on the screen, please.
And north elevation is called desert sand paint color. It's a powder coat on aluminum. And I went and had that matched by Benjamin Moore, and that is a Greenwich gate, which is not necessarily a white, it's more of a beige, and maybe it's more legible if you look at the printout versus this.
Okay, so what you are showing us is not white. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's like a tan. It's more tan. It's not white.
So you're actually not going to the original color?
We're going as close to the original color as we can guesstimate from the paint chips that we have.
Oh, okay, I just heard you say the original color was white, and you are not going to that color.
To a white. Right. We're going to an off-white.
Member Aguilar, Madrano?
Madam Chair, I think I share Member Bienvenu's reservations about the east elevation in particular, especially because it's a publicly visible facade. My reservations are also changing the openings of the windows. And then I also have some reservations about the color, especially now hearing, you know, that the previous argument was that the original color was thought to be what I took as a brighter white, and now seeing that the proposed is a tan. So it doesn't seem like the argument stands now that we're trying to match what was believed to be the original color. So for that reason, I'm more inclined to keep the blue color as is.
Well, the blue color exists only on the frame of the windows that are there now. The actual window is black.
Any other comments or questions? I will entertain a motion at this time.
I have one more question for the applicant. So since some of the board members are interested in, you know, the blue color of the windows, you know, over the off-white choice, are there any, do you know of any blue shades that are available in the brand that you're looking at?
I would probably have to look at another brand because when we went to look at window colors, blue was one of those that we looked at, and the closest thing that they had to it was sort of like a mint, you know, it was like a kind of a sage green color.
Okay.
There was nothing that was even blue, like a Williamsburg blue or, you know, like a faded blue. So that's why we had opted to find something else.
So, you know, in respect to the motion, when we make the motion, maybe we should suggest that it should be a true white or as close to the blue as we can with staff's approval. I'm just trying to throw ideas out and see where the other board members think so we can have an efficient motion.
That is a good suggestion, because what is being introduced by the applicant this evening is not historic. Sorry, applicant.
Madeline had a comment, right?
Yes.
I was just going to ask, if the trim was to be maintained as blue, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's pretty common that the windows are just black as they currently are. And I think we see that in new construction, that you're not necessarily trying to match the windows exactly to the trim, but rather the windows are neutral.
I have not seen an example of that.
I think if we put in the motion that it to either be bright white or to be blue, I think we have to do that knowing that it's going to be bright white is my only concern. If we
You can get bright white. And I don't know about the different shades of blue, but I do know that you can get white. Yes, Member Berkeley.
I guess my question is, why are we limited to this brand of window if this brand of window doesn't present colors that seem to be acceptable or approved by members here?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
I'm wondering if there is any other brand of window, since what we're talking about here are people's questions about the colors available of that brand. Is there just simply another brand?
I can do further research on it, but we did do some extensive research on this. First of all, this is a very small home. This is for a client that does not have an extending budget where we can have custom powder coating or things like that. And so we're working within the means of what is the availability on the market of materials. But I can certainly do a little more research if we can accept that the color of the windows could be an administrative approval at some point.
Member Larson.
I'm ready to make a motion. In case 2022-005598 HDRB at 1000 Canyon Road, I move that we approve the application following staff's recommendation with the following clarification that the windows be replaced in the same color as the historic paint color that was found by the chip test, being a true white, and finding that the exception criteria have been met.
So second. Motion dies for lack of second, and I will entertain another motion. Please. Member Biche.
I guess I just have a question for the applicant. Is there a proposal you can find acceptable that retains the Taos blue color on the painted elements of the house, but uses a more neutral, as suggested by Member Aguilar-Majano, that neutral color for the metal windows themselves?
More neutral.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That would mean that the north window and door would remain blue, and the other windows would go to the off-white, matching the color, the historic color. Is that what you were saying?
Yeah, I guess, the white, we're really getting into the details here, but I guess the white and blue seems a bit too much of a contrast. I don't know if there's a more neutral, like just a black or a bronze color with respect to the divided lights. I don't know what other people think, but I'm just looking for a solution that allows us to keep that defining blue color. Yeah.
Well, I think it could work because the windows on the east and west side are not going to have the pediment design that was sort of tacked on that's there. So all you really have is stucco and then the color of the trim. And the trim, we're trying to make it, the intention is that it look as though it's a painted wood window. And I don't know of any historical precedents of painting the window frames black in New Mexico.
Okay. Do you plan to paint the canales and the downspouts like they are now?
Yes.
And that you're proposing white?
I was hoping that we could match all the wood trim.
I just have to say, I think this is getting way too, we're asking the applicant to jump through a lot of hoops here, and, I think it's fair to have expectations, but this might be getting a little too down into the details. I think these windows that we have that are black right now with the wood trim that's painted blue, those windows are, not of any value, historically or of the material. So I don't know why we would maintain that in our motion.
New motion, please. And I would suggest that the person that's making the motion also indicate the color of the door. I don't think that was addressed, unless you are going to have it as submitted by the applicant. Yes, Member Larson, you're going to try it again?
Yeah, I'll give it one more go. In case 2022-005598 HDRB 1000 Canyon Road, I move that we approve the application following staff's recommendations with the following conditions: that the replacement windows be a true white, and that painted wood elements be maintained in the Taos blue color, with the exception of the trim of the windows, which should be white.
Biche will second that.
And you said the door is?
The door is maintained in Taos blue.
Okay. Roll call vote, please.
Member Aguilar-Medrano?
No.
Member Berkeley?
No.
Scheib?
Yes.
Member Bienvenu?
No.
Member Larson?
Yes.
The motion has failed.
Okay, board members, please, think about it. Let's try another motion. One of you.
I will try. My problem is I want to maintain the steel casement window, which is already blue. So I think I'm going to have to stay with the blue colors here, which I also agree with. So in case number 2022-005598 HDRB, 1000 Canyon Road, I move that the project be approved on condition that the steel casement window on the east side be retained and that the trim that is currently in, everything that is currently in the blue color be maintained in the blue color as close as possible, as close as possibly can be matched in whatever replacements are being made.
We also need to address the exception.
The exception criteria have all been met.
And is there a second?
Question.
Yes, Carly.
Or can Member Bienvenu retain the steel casement window only or replace in kind?
Repair the steel casement window if needed, but retain the steel casement window.
Thank you.
Is there a second to this motion? The motion dies.
I will second with a friendly amendment.
Yes.
That the window be allowed to be replaced in kind per staff's or per an administrative approval should it be in poor condition.
Meaning unrepairable by
Yes.
virtue of an assessment? Sure,
Yes.
definitely.
Any other amendments? If not, roll call vote, please.
Member Aguilar Medrano?
No.
Member Berkeley?
No.
Member Beachside?
No.
Excuse me?
No.
No. Member Bienvenu?
Yes.
Member Larson?
Yes.
The motion failed.
Third time, they say third time's the charm. Yes, Member
So-
Aguilar Medrano.
I just want to make my reservation about this clear, and I'd be curious to hear from you, Member Bienvenu, as well. The east elevation, I guess my reservation is changing the openings and adding openings to that elevation. That's where I'm not, that's why I haven't voted yes in the past. So I would be in favor of, keeping the location of the windows, and I'm more flexible on the color, I think, than changing the window openings on that facade so much. So I'd be curious to hear from you, Member Bienvenu, as well as where you stand on that, because I know you had reservations in the beginning as well.
Right. So I'm in agreement with that generally speaking. So if that's the consensus of the board, that's my view as well.
Can I comment on the window openings? Because I think there's maybe a misunderstanding on the left side. We are not expanding or shrinking any of those window sizes. We are maintaining the openings of those. The door that is below grade, we are replacing it with a window dimension in like to all the other windows that are currently on the building, and we're just adding another window to a facade that is not considered primary. Is the east elevation primary or not primary?
No, the east elevation is not primary.
So, we'd like to add more windows to this small home so that there's more light coming in, that there's more, air circulation. We're actually, all the new windows are the same size as the existing windows, so we aren't changing any sizes.
I think so then it's really just the addition of the window on the right side of that elevation. That's the one new window that you're proposing.
Right. But then the door on the left side becomes a window as well.
Right. Would you consider not adding the new window opening?
In which location?
So looking at the east elevation, the window on the far right, that's the new opening that you're proposing, correct?
Well, that's the living room, and not right now currently, there's one window and that T-shaped door in terms of being able to have views and air circulation.
Member Beachai?
Yeah, just I feel like we should continue the conversation with the applicant a little bit more. I think that the east elevation, with its changes, presents a more cohesive set of openings in terms of the size of the windows and the light pattern. It will become consistent, but it still retains that long, distinctive facade. I applaud the applicant for proposing really rather minor changes to this property, which is quite special. And I feel uncomfortable discussing the paint color without some. No one on this board is an architect at the moment, right? so I feel like we shouldn't be the ones, designing that element or choosing a color there. So appreciate obviously the Talus blue is a significant color, and I wanted to respect that if we could, but I don't know about the practicality of that. And also, I didn't see the window assessment or the paint color mentioned in the packet. So I think this is sort of new to all of us, that the color was changing.
Did have it on paper.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
So I understand the board is struggling with a couple things here. One is the vernacular style of the building, and then changing the windows and adding openings that may have impact on the style of the building. Now, it not being a primary facade, we cannot deny adding an opening unless you really see that these changes are changing the style of the building itself. Unless you see another legal basis for that, I'm just going to nudge the board into thinking about in that light. I understand the information, yes, it appears the window assessment isn't in the packet, and we go by historic colors. So if we don't necessarily know, and there's not information on when that blue came into effect and how many layers there are, this is something that we run into on a regular basis. When we're trying to identify what paint was actually used when, there might be several layers. And does that give an applicant a selection? Not necessarily. It makes it there's more latitude for the board to really think about there. So that's on those two fronts, remaining within our code and what the board can and cannot do. That's the two areas that we have to look at. What are the historic colors? Are there other historic colors? If we do not have that information, that can be something that potentially is administratively approved with historic evidence per our code. And then on the other side of things, consider what I had to say about historic opening, making new openings and non-primary facades.
May I be heard on the matter?
Yes.
Area. So with respect to downtown and east side design standards. Sure. With respect to downtown and east side design standards, consider this to be either an old Santa Fe style home or a recent Santa Fe style home. My perspective is the old Santa Fe style applies, but you could argue about that. But under subsection 1B of subsection E of 14-5.2, on what reads with respect to colors are all exterior walls of the building are painted alike. The colors range from a light earth color to a dark earth color. The exception to this rule is the protected space under portales or in church-derived designs, inset panels, and a wall under a roof. spaces may be white or a contrasting color or have mural decorations. So I think that so long as it's the board's perspective that the colors that the applicant sees are within a range of light earth colors to dark earth colors.
But is that referring to the stucco color? I believe that is referring to the stucco color,
Well,
as opposed to the window color.
that is correct, but they're really,
But board members,
I don't think there's anything that tells you what color the portal has to be. You know, just other than it's not uncommon to have a contrasting color under the portal, but with respect to the actual color of the windows, the portals, the doors, I don't think the code.
to me, this is not a grossly complicated case. It's not like the applicant has come before us and wants to add a second story and wants to change the style of the home. So I'm going to ask you to please look at this very closely, and I want to entertain a motion that is clear.
I will say one last thing, and that's, this applicant has done their due diligence. He has experience with these properties. This is a very modest property. And he made a very important point of the hardship that it poses to replace these windows and powder coat them based on the preference of this board, which does not have historical evidence to back up the color of this house. It's based on preference. And, I'm always willing to work to find a solution that, satisfies the board and the applicant, but I think this has gone way too far. And, I think we have to consider strongly that this poses a hardship to continue to search for window brands that would, meet the niche color that we're suggesting, and that would also satisfy the price point and, all of these things that are beyond the purview of this board. So in case 2022-005598-HDRV 1000 Canyon Road, I move that we approve the application as submitted with the following condition: that the windows be replaced in a true white, and that everything else is in line with staff's recommendation, and that exception criteria have been met. It's everything in line with staff's recommendation.
Which is the color, what is staff's recommendation on that color? Angela, the color of the door?
I would suggest that it would be white and consistency with the rest of the house.
That's correct. It's white and it matches the house, and he's replacing it in kind. And that means the color and everything. That was my recommendation.
Is there a second to this motion?
Each side seconds.
Roll call vote, please.
Member Aguilar Medrano.
I'm sorry, but my vote is still no.
Member Berkeley.
I'm going to say yes.
Member Beachside.
Yes.
Member Bienvenu.
No.
Member Larson.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Okay. Thank you. Nobody ever said that some of these applications were going to be very easy. The last case this evening is located at 513 Canyon Road. May we hear that case, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is case 2022-005795 HDRB. We are at, and I'm going to ask IT to please switch our camera. There we go. Now that we're looking at the slideshow, we are looking at 513 Canyon Road, which is in the downtown Eastside Historic District. It is an L-shaped building here with a parking lot in the middle. as you kind of come down to the parking lot, and this is kind of the south end of that property here. This is, the building is in an L shape. It is Spanish Pueblo Revival style, and we're looking at the south end here. The building grew pre-1912. It could be as early as 1880, according to historians' information that was included in the packet. So you're looking at the oldest portion here. And as you go north and to the west on the building, we're going north. The building gets a little newer and newer, and then we get to some, essentially where it becomes is in the 1950s, inclusive of the second-story addition. Now, the only really substantial changes happen right around 1984 when Morningstar Gallery becomes the owner, and the chimney here and the mechanical room get added. There was a remodel done at that time. Yard walls were added. Okay, and so as you can see, we go west, and here is this western addition. The vigas on this portion are, they don't go all the way through. They're only on the exterior there, unlike the rest of the building. So here's a little, some of the aerials. So what we're looking at here is the 1912 King's map. This little piece of the building is the southernmost portion of the L shape. And as we talked about, it grew, and then grew over into 1958. We can see that it's a stable building, but it does not have that shadow of the chimney there. That you can likely see much better in the packet than you can here, but you would see that where my cursor is right here, and it's not there. Okay. And then in this one, you would see a darker shadow. It's a little harder to see on the presentation here than it is in the packet. So if you'd like to refer to your packet for that, that's where you would want to be. All right, so we are looking at we've got the gallery, we've got the former residence. You'll see viga, protruding viga ends on the upper portion here, and the lower portion here. And they are as well further down. Now this is the kitchen, which is just west of the former residence, and that has smaller diameter timber viga latillas on the interior. So we expect that to be kind of the older portion of the house, and then that mechanical room is labeled here, and that was added. And so the recommendation is really for that this outline portion that excludes the mechanical room on the west elevation to be primary. So we're looking also at the south right here, and then the west minus the mechanical room. The river rock walls, I'll speak to the courtyard walls. Courtyard walls were added sometime around 1984. They're relatively newer. The west courtyard wall is as well. Now, the river rock walls here, and then the wall that is along the streetscape, those are indicative of, they don't really show up in the aerials, and we don't have a good date on them, but they are indicative of the older walls and are quite a bit different from what was newly added. So the recommendation from staff is for contributing. Okay, and here are the elevations. I'm just going to speak to the south elevation briefly. These are 1990s windows right here with some snap-in muntins, maybe late 80s, but that's what you're seeing on this elevation. These are the viga, protruding vigas that don't go into the house, so there is some evidence of some sort of remodel that happened that potentially changed that. it looks like it could have been a portal. We don't really have evidence to see exactly what it was, but that is one of the main reasons that we're pushing outside of that zone of what could be primaried here. And then we have this two-story addition here. It is from before 1958 for that two-story addition, but we also have the chimney addition and the mechanical room added onto that portion. And the architectural value that it adds is questionable, and so that is why it is left out of the staff recommendation tonight. And so just to conclude, we are looking at maintaining the historic, the staff's recommendation is to maintain the historic status as contributing and to designate the south elevation of the east wing and the west elevation of the east wing, excluding the mechanical room and chimney, designating this as primary. Also recommending that the river rock walls, including the wall along the street or along Canyon Road, be designated as contributing, while maintaining the central courtyard wall and the west courtyard wall as non-contributing, just for clarity. And I will stand for questions, or I can turn it over.
Thank you, Carly. Carly, did you also address the three little rock portions?
So those are the river rock walls, and I didn't give a number of the river rock walls. There's actually 3 small retaining walls plus the wall along the streetscape. For clarity, that makes 4, and those should all be included as on the contributing designation.
Thank you, Carly. Any other questions for Carly? None. Gayla?
Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Gayla Betzel, 320 Aztec Street, Santa Fe, New Mexico, 87501. Evening.
Good evening. Do you agree with staff's recommendations?
I agree with most of it. I do would like to present a slightly different primary facade on the west or south. What is the south? No, the south I think is wonderful, and so looking at the south elevation helps me to make my argument that the oldest part of the gallery is truly special, and when you walk in, it's really you feel the oldness of the structure, and that was in the 1800s, 1880s, something like that. It extended further underneath the second floor. The thing that I'm struggling with Carly's recommendation is the kitchen. It was built, it's probably single wide adobe, the vigas. I mean, so it is an appropriately built Spanish Pueblo style, Santa Fe style building, or portion of this building. But it pales, in my estimation, in its quality of construction to the other side of the southernmost wing. And so I would prefer to have only the southernmost part of the east wing be primary, those 2 facades, and not the facade of the kitchen. But otherwise, I agree. The rock walls, absolutely. It's a lovely property. I did talk to the former owner of Morningstar Gallery, Matt Glimmer, who did the renovation in '84. And he said that this had been a dress shop at some point when he bought it, and it was a construction project gone wrong. And so it was a shell of a building when he made it into the Spanish Pueblo revival style that we see now. And next time he's in town, he'll go through his records and find
the pictures. So Gayla, am I understanding you correctly, you agree with having the south elevation of the east wing as primary?
Yes.
But
South-
not the west elevation?
No, the portal as well, the west elevation, so the west and south elevation of the easternmost wing, the oldest part of the gallery, just not the kitchen. The kitchen covered up the old wall. Inside, behind the kitchen, this is like a double adobe and plus wall. And the addition of the kitchen, it just appears to me an addition to a very interesting, significant work on Canyon Road. I mean, it's right next to the Prada House. It's attached to the Prada House. So it's an important structure, and I just I don't disagree with the logic. I just prefer that the most special, the most characteristic piece of this building be primary.
Thank you. I would like Carly to respond to your comments and why not to include the kitchen.
And I'm going to also just draw a little box in the elevation so we can see that. What we're referring to is the kitchen, because I'm not sure that the staff report makes that super clear, or at least the facade diagram doesn't make that super clear. So what we're looking at is right there, and we're going to go back to the slideshow. There we go. So part of it is what I saw in the kitchen is it looks to me very much like an enclosed portal with small diameter Latia ceiling. And those, throughout time, portals get enclosed. It's also the historic windows. While the vigas are very close set on the windows, that looks to me like potentially, like that's the potentially enclosed part of that portal. Now, the other piece of this is really, going by the definition of our primary facades, and really does it hold together some of the highest character. And really, the way we look at these, we want to go for enough of the elevation to show what's really been going on in the house. Like this shows the kind of stepped massing that is happening throughout. I was struggling with not including the second story piece, but architecturally that doesn't add quite that much uniqueness. So, even though it would capture the expressionary, the change over time and vernacular nature of this building, is it really necessary? No, but only preserving this small area as a primary facade just didn't seem quite the right move, especially with the double window there. But as you get right up next to the mechanical room, that's kind of where everything tends to break down. That's where the dividing line is for me. Yes, one area is a beautiful piece of architecture, but we often see, as it change, we do capture this change in the building as you go a little bit more north. So that's really the main reasoning there.
Thank you, Carly. Board members, questions for Carly or Gayla? Or comment? Nothing at this time. Anyone from the public wanting to speak? John Run.
We have plenty of time. Thank you, Madam Chair, board members. I was in and out of this house as a youngster. I grew up with the Reed family. but I don't remember it very well from those times. So, but in looking at the packet, I see a couple of elements in this house that I find very, very beautiful and special. And I think they're on the west facade, generally speaking. One of them is under the portal, and if I'm reading the photograph correctly, it's a adobe banco built onto a wall, and it's painted in the back. So it's a banco within a banco, which is a really beautiful thing. I've never seen that anywhere. The vernacular word banco was a painted element on the underside of a wall, the lowest side of a wall, which was a different color from the upper part of the wall. So that's a really beautiful element that I think should be protected. There's also a door on, I believe, on the west facade. And it looks to me, I'm not seeing it in person, but it looks to me as a door that William Penhallow Henderson might have made. I don't know if the architect has any information on this. It has spindles above, a panel of spindles. And that's a very classic design that Henderson may not have come up with, but he used it repeatedly in his own house. So perhaps there's some historical connection here because the timing of this house coincides with Penhallow Henderson's activity in Santa Fe as well, his building. So anyway, those are just little elements that I thought are really special, and I want to make sure you notice them. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Anybody else? If not, board members, do you have any further questions or comments? Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question for staff. Thank you for your comments. I found them very helpful, and I appreciate them. So looking at the west-facing portal, if that were designated as primary, does that automatically give protection to the Banco feature, or would that have to be noted as something separate contributing?
Madam Chair, thank you, Member Aguilar Medrano. So that would include the portal. Now, where it gets specific and where I think it needs more consideration, this is why we go for the larger elevation, is so if you see in the south elevation there, the wall turns on the west elevation. So, part of collecting this whole elevation, you also capture this on the south elevation, which is that one turn of the building there, which is a beautiful historic windows and divided light, and lovely double window there.
No, thank you, Madam Chair.
Anything else, board members? If not, motion, please.
I'll make a motion. Aguilar Medrano, in case number 2022-005795 HDRB 513 Canyon Road, I move to approve the application as proposed by staff.
Is there a second?
I will second, and just to clarify that the staff's recommendation was that the south elevation of the east wing and the west elevation of the east wing, including the mechanical room and chimney, be designated primary.
Agree, yes.
And that the 4 rock walls on the south side of the property be designated contributing.
Yes, agree.
Roll call vote, please.
Member Aguilar Medrano?
Yes.
Member Berkeley?
Yes.
Member Beachside?
Yes.
Member Bienvenue?
Yes.
Member Larson?
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Gayla?
Would like a clarification. Did you say including or excluding the mechanical room and the chimney?
Excluding the mechanical room and the chimney.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. For a minute there, I thought we were going to go
To what? Attend?
Anything under discussion items?
No, Madam Chair.
This is the right answer. Any matters from the board? Nothing, and our next meeting is going to be on September 27th, also on a Tuesday. And, yes, Carla?
I will be sending out some information regarding the next meeting. We will have the New Mexico School for the Arts application coming forward, which is a different section of the code. So it'll just be a little, I'll send that section out of the code so that you can refresh or before that time.
I will entertain a motion for adjournment.
Larson moves.
Second, Beachhead.
It is 9:12. Roll call vote.
Member Aguilar Medrano?
Yes.
Member Berkeley?
Yes.
Member Beached?
Yes.
Member Bienvenu? Member Larson?
Yes.
The motion has been approved.